across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Thank you so much for your company here on the Evening Exchange, and there's so much to talk about. It's been a very dramatic day in Parliament, in Washington and around the world. We'll be talking about Keir Starmer getting through just 15 Labour rebels, no privileges committee inquiry into what he has been doing. It'll be very interesting to get to the bottom of all of that. Also in America, a shocking story. America's special relationship is probably not with this country, but with Israel. That's what the UK ambassador to the United States said 2 months ago. It's now come back to haunt him now. So much with all of this. Of course, Mandelson was the ambassador. Why wasn't Karen Pierce, the person who was there already, just left to get on with the job? We'll talk about Netanyahu as well. Also, the Guardian's journalist who wrote a horrifically, in my personal view, anti-Semitic restaurant review talking about a Gale's Bakery being a hostile act. Well, he has won a major sports journalism award. Absolutely shameful that he should even have been considered for that. We'll talk about the UK having the third highest rate of young adults not in work or study, and whether stealing chips from a friend's plate, whether they taste better if you've done so. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So much to discuss, to say nothing of the King in Washington against the background of that very embarrassing diplomatic row, and of course Morgan McSweeney's evidence to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. So much to talk about today, so many points. What do you think of Starmer? Can he survive? Should he survive? Let me know your thoughts on all of this. Also, have you stolen chips from someone else's plate, and did they taste better? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note. You can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Let's do that together here on the Evening Exchange on Talk. Well, Starmer's got through just 15 Labour rebels. There were, of course, many others who voted against him, but 223 MPs voted for the privileges inquiry and 335 said no to it. In total, 15 Labour MPs went against the strong whip, what's called the three-line whip, basically saying you have to do this, otherwise there will be consequences from the Labour whips, the Labour disciplinarians, and voted for this Tory-led effort to subject the PM to an investigation by the Privileges Committee. No massive shock in some of the names there: Richard Bergen, Brian Leishman, Andy McDonnell, Nadia Whittam, Kat Smith, various people, John McDonnell. No huge surprises there. Afsana Begum as well, Emma Lewell. Lots of people who don't like Keir Starmer, so there's quite a lot in all of that. In Parliament today, there was so much opposition to Keir Starmer in so many different ways, not least from Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives. This is what she said.
Members opposite want to pretend that this is something that only one party is doing. Can I remind them that this is a cross-party motion supported by independents, the Lib Dems, the DUP, the SNP, members from across this House. Calling this a stunt is disrespecting this House and disrespecting the Speaker. It's very obvious, listening to the media and their tweets, it's very obvious they've all been told to come here today. Tell everybody it's a stunt. Tell everybody it's a stunt. Why are they acting like sheep? Why are they acting like sheep? They should be better than that. We will be counting, by the way. Some people might even be shouting bingo at how many times people stand up and say that this is a stunt in this debate. We're looking forward to it.
We're going to get full analysis right throughout the programme of this, and certainly we will talk about this story right up until 10 o'clock. Whatever your view on it, let me know what your thoughts are. 0344 499 1000. But I want to talk about another matter now. There's been loads of coverage of this throughout the day. As I say, we will talk about it throughout the programme. We'll get top analysis from really good voices on all of this. But I want to talk about something that's really concerning me, a couple of things that are concerning me, actually. You know by now that anti-Semitism is out of control in this country. Zach Polanski, the leader of the Green Party, saying that the Greens are no more anti-Semitic than Labour. He says anti-Semitism is a problem in every party, and it's a problem in his party. Well, his party has suspended Nadia Sawalha's husband. He is standing as a candidate in a constituency. We're going to read out all the names of the constituency, keeping in mind electoral law, in a minute or two. But she has a clip out there on all of this. Nadia Sawalha, of course, the media personality. She's on Loose Women again next Monday. They don't seem to worry about her views on the Middle East. I do wonder whether she would be in Loose Women and lots of other programmes if she had the same strength of views about other controversial issues. I do wonder why anti-Semitism is the issue that she seems to be allowed to express very, very strong opinions of. She denies, of course, that both she and her husband are anti-Semites at all. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. He is standing, I should say, in a London constituency as for the Green Party, and he's on the ballot paper as well. And we'll read out all the names of that party. But he's been suspended from the Green Party, and even though he's on the ballot in Crystal Palace and Upper Norwood in London, this is something of a controversy. Let's see what Nadia Sawalha has been saying about this. She's posted this online.
He's been suspended by the Green Party. The details, as I say, are on his Instagram. It's been a really horrible few days, or more than a few days, really a couple of weeks. He's now in the punishment phase. Of course, we've been being punished all along, right from when we first started talking about Palestine. The dark forces behind everything that you see is quite extraordinary, I have to tell you. And we will tell you more about that and reveal more about that over time. Of being slandered, being accused, Mark being accused of being a racist and an anti-Semite. It doesn't touch you in the way, because 100% you're not an anti-Semite. He knows he's not an anti-Semite. He knows he's not a racist. And there are some people in the Green Party, like in any other society, who are completely and utterly hell-bent on doing exactly what was done within the Labour Party to the Green Party, in my opinion, and in many, many other people's opinions.
Nadia Sawalha there speaking about her husband Mark Adderley. He is standing for the Green Party in Crystal Palace and Upper Norwood, and I will, for electoral law reasons, read out all the candidates that are standing in that constituency in the next few minutes. But first of all, I want to get a perspective from Jake Wallace-Simons. He is a Telegraph columnist and author of Never Again, a very good book which is in my possession. Jake, you're very welcome to the programme. What do you make of this row, and indeed Zach Polanski saying that anti-Semitism in the Green Party is no worse than in any other political party?
I mean, there's so much to be said about all of this. I mean, Nadia Sawalha, that was a quite appalling clip from her. Not that it's any surprise. She's quite expert at producing appalling clips. I mean, to me, it seems like quite brazen anti-Semitism. I mean, obviously, she would deny that. But the thing about anti-Semites is they always think they're the good guys. They always think that they're the ones in the right. It's just that the Jews happen to be evil. And so any decent person would respond by hating the Jews and wanting to eliminate them from society for the good of society. That seems to be the sort of attitude that's coming across to me anyway, subjectively, from what she's saying. The Green Party, it doesn't just have a problem with anti-Semitism. It is built upon anti-Semitism, as far as I can see. If you look at all the campaigning videos that their councillors have produced, don't forget they're contesting local council seats about bins and other things like that. They're all talking about Gaza. I mean, Gaza, there's been a ceasefire in Gaza for months now. Why are they still going on about it? Because they know that it's going to attract votes. Unfortunately, it seems that anti-Semitism sells in a political sense. And as for Zach Polanski, saying that the Green Party is no more anti-Semitic than the Labour Party. Well, I think it's interesting that many Corbynites moved from the Labour Party when Keir Starmer took over into the Green Party. So in a way, I think the Green Party is like how the Labour Party was under Corbyn, only without the moderates balancing it out as far as they could. It really is a completely anti-Semitic party, is allied with Islamists and, in some cases, jihadis who have a very bad track record of demonstrating bigotry towards Jews. And it seems once again that, anti-Semitism is the racism that you can get away with. Imagine if Nadia Sawalha had made a video simply saying, I believe in Israel's right to exist, and I believe in Israel's right to defend itself, two entirely uncontroversial statements, I think her position would be in jeopardy on loose women. But she can get away with talking about dark forces, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, in our society, pulling the strings and targeting her and her husband, and it's totally fine. She's still employed as she was before. I think that tells us a lot about where we are today in modern Britain.
Zach Polanski, though, has told ITV, I don't think it is any more of a problem than any other political party or in society. He said, speaking of the Green Party, he is, of course, Jewish, and far too often I see the Labour Party politicising this. Yet Steve Reid, the man who's doing the most talking about this, he's the Community Secretary, Labour MP, Labour Cabinet Minister, is a man who had to apologise for calling a Jewish donor a puppet master. Mr Polanski referring to a tweet by Mr Reid, who's the Community Secretary in 2020, about a Jewish Conservative donor. Mr Reid later apologised for that. Do you think Zach Polanski has a point in this at all? His point, of course, is, and his views have changed quite a lot on this. When he was standing for the Liberal Democrats for the London Assembly, for example, he said, a vote for me is a vote for Israel. I'm not sure he'd be saying that now.
No, I mean, Zach Polanski, shamefully, has turned himself into probably British politics' foremost mouthpiece for anti-Semitism, in my view. The stuff he comes out with really would make many dyed-in-the-wool anti-Semites blush in terms of how brazenly he says it. And I think he thinks he can get away with it because he's Jewish. And throughout history, some fringe Jews have made a name for themselves articulating anti-Semitism almost more than the anti-Semites do. I mean, all the way back to 1144, when the blood libel was first invented, when the Jews were wrongly accused of killing a Christian child for using the blood in their rituals. The person who first made that allegation, Theobald of Cambridge, was himself a Jew who'd converted to Christianity and invented this libel, which then went around the world and persists to this day in the myth of Israelis being gleeful child baby killers. So Zach Polanski stands, in my view, in a long tradition of Jewish articulation of anti-Semitism. I mean, he said just the other day that Jews in Britain were suffering from a perception of unsafety, which didn't correspond to their actual lack of safety in this country. That's despite the repeated arson attacks, repeated attempted terror attacks, and the murder of 2 Jews in Manchester last year. I mean, it's absolutely shameful.
Tell us your thoughts on Jonathan Liew, who is the Guardian writer, who has won a major award at the Sports Journalism Awards. He is a sports writer, but he talked about Cafe Metro, a small Palestinian restaurant in Archway in London, and a branch of Gale's Bakery that opened 2 doors down. It feels quietly symbolic, an act of heavy-handed high street aggression, pointing out that Gale's parent company, Bain Capital, invests heavily in military technology, including Israeli security companies. I do wonder whether he would have won that award last night, a major award at the Sports Journalism Awards, had he said that a Nigerian cafe opening, a Caribbean cafe opening, a cafe run by LGBT people, for example, seemed like a heavy-handed act of high street aggression.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, I mean, I think that particular scandal was, the only silver lining to it was that it was quite hilarious. I mean, to describe a bakery as anti-Semitic because it moves 2 doors down from a Palestinian bakery. I mean, this bakery has quite tenuous links to Israel. It has some investments in Israel, as far as I understand it. But in his article, he was saying that Gale's, which had been targeted by anti-Semitic vandalism, smashed windows, graffiti messages about corporate Zionism and so on, Liew described those as merely small acts of petty symbolism, and the greater crime in his view seemed to be this act of heavy-handed aggression of daring to open a cafe in the vicinity of a Palestinian-run cafe. I mean, it's sort of tinfoil hat stuff, totally insane and quite hilarious, but also it came across to many people as extremely bigoted and offensive.
Yeah, he's apparently one of the greatest journalists in the country, according to the Sports Journalism Awards, which is something
but, you know, he's not the first. I mean, let's not forget, Gary Lineker was awarded Best Presenter at the National Television Awards last year after having been sacked from the BBC for sharing a rat emoji about Jews. So there's form when it comes to sports and awarding people who've been guilty, or in many people's eyes, of anti-Semitism.
Tell me, just before you go, your thoughts on Tehran's embassy in London, the Iranian embassy, calling on Iranians living in the UK to sacrifice their lives for their regime. Really, really astonishing stuff here. Well,
let me be clear, as Keir Starmer would say. We should not have an Iranian embassy in Britain. Certainly we should not have an Iranian ambassador in Britain. He should have been expelled a long time ago. Keir Starmer has announced recently that he's going to ban the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps from Britain. That should have been done years ago. These people are terrorists, plotting and aiding and abetting terrorism on our shores. Iranian regime supporters should not be welcome in Britain, and they should not be free to publish messages advertising martyrdom to anybody in Britain who has sympathies with that regime. But it's a diplomatic problem. I mean, the United Nations, I note, just yesterday elected Iran as one of the vice presidents of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Review Conference.
Outrageous.
So this is a problem in diplomatic circles. But yeah, they should all be out of this country.
Jake, thank you very much indeed for that. Just to keep us on the right side of electoral law, this is going to be a bit dull perhaps, but it has to be done for electoral law. We're not talking about Nadia Sawalha's husband Mark Adderley in regard to his particular constituency that he is standing in, but just to be absolutely clear and to keep on the right side of electoral law, we're going to read out all the candidates that are standing in Crystal Palace and Upper Norwood. We're in an electoral period at the moment. This is the election of Borough Council, so he, Mark Adderley, is standing for the Green Party, Claire Elizabeth Bonham for the Liberal Democrats, Ken Coles for Reform UK, Nigel Albert Dingley for the Liberal Democrats, Fereshta Imami for the Local Conservatives, Sangeeta Gubadias for the Labour and Cooperative Party, Will Linsdale for Labour and Cooperative Party, Philip Martins-Marks for the Local Conservatives, Sue Millward for Reform UK, Yusuf Ali Osman for the Liberal Democrats, Liam Anthony Shipton for the Green Party, Magnus Turek Sorensen for Labour and the Cooperative Party, Natalie Louise Vesti for the Green Party, Desmond John Wright for the Local Conservatives, and Sajjan Xavier for Reform UK. That is an electoral necessity, and we want to keep on the right side of the law and compliance, of course. Lots of people have been in touch about tonight's parliamentary vote. I'm going to play 3 voice notes in just a second, but first of all, let's remind ourselves what Sir Lindsay Hoyle did, the Speaker of the House of Commons, when he announced this vote.
The ayes to the right, 223. The noes to the left, 335. The noes have it, unlock.
That is Sir Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons, confirming that Keir Starmer will not face a Privileges Committee investigation. Lots of people getting in touch about this. Let's hear from Peter.
This farce with Keir Starmer, it just goes to show that they can do what they like in Parliament, can't they? A Prime Minister can do what they like, right? And nobody can do anything about it. You got this, and before you had all the MPs voting against an inquiry into the grooming gangs. You've got Peter Mandelson just seems to be doing what he's like. I mean, who even put him up? He shouldn't even been given a job as a toilet cleaner, let alone a job of ambassador to America. There's something very fishy going on in Parliament with all this, backing up people. How can you defend the indefensible?
Peter, listen, thank you for that. There are quite a number of very good cleaners in this office who clean our toilets, and I would trust them a heck of a lot more than I would trust Peter Mandelson, let me tell you. Hayley has been in touch as well with a voice note.
Hi, Peter. Surely Starmer dictating that people should vote in his favour, that's dictatorship, isn't it? And everybody knows that they didn't want to do that. It was because their jobs were on the line. This is absolutely disgraceful. There's no honesty in politics at the moment. I don't know why I expect it, but, you know, you want something to believe in. It's just...
Hayley, we're all looking for something to believe in, but I would say, just in Sir Keir Starmer's defence, can't believe I'm saying this, but it's true, the whipping operation, the fact that you stand and you're an MP for that party, the whips those disciplinarians within that party, Tories, Reform UK, the Labour, Green Party, whoever it is, they tell you how to vote on certain things. It is interesting, and a contrast and a different thing, that when Boris Johnson was facing his privileges inquiry, he had a free vote, so all MPs could vote however they wanted. However, within that, I think it's also worth noting that he had lost a lot of support at that time. It's difficult to tell where the support or lack of support is for Keir Starmer, but I know our viewers and listeners are keeping a very, very close eye on that, and we will too, and we'll continue to talk about this throughout the programme. Whatever's on the tip of your tongue, 0344 499 1000. Just before we go to the break, the debate desk tonight is between Phil Dave and Sebastian Salek. We're going to hear Adrian's thoughts on tonight's parliamentary vote.
I think everyone needs to note this day in their diary, because this is the day that democracy died in the United Kingdom. We have a PM who everyone can see lied, and he uses the power over his own MPs to prevent any scrutiny of his lies. Absolutely shameful and pathetic. All those MPs should be ashamed of themselves. They've betrayed their voters, and it just proves we have got to completely and utterly rebuild democracy in the UK.
Adrian, thank you for that. Thanks also to Nat in Tel Aviv, who says, to be thought too anti-Semitic for the Green Party takes some skill. Plenty to discuss, including what's happening in Parliament tonight. We'll get to that on the debate desk in just a few minutes. I also want to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000.
The handover briefing I was getting as I arrived at post was what I felt was a generally dismissive attitude to his vetting clearance. The focus was on getting Mandelson out to Washington quickly. Despite this atmosphere, an atmosphere of pressure, the department completed developed vetting to the normal high standard. Because the vetting process is not there to determine fitness for office or reputational risk, it's there to protect national security.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we're on the debate desk now, and I'm delighted that Phil Dave is joining us this evening, Talk presenter. How are you, Phil? You all right?
Very well, thank you. Hopefully you are as well.
Yes, indeed. And Sebastian Stillick, the political commentator, is with us.
Good to see you.
It's been quite a dramatic day in Parliament. We'll get into all of that very, very shortly. Let's just remind ourselves what Kemi Badenoch's been saying. She has not minced her words. She says Labour MPs are siding with Epstein.
But let me be clear, what they are saying is they vote against this motion. Would they rather be on the side of Peter Mandelson, of convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, of Morgan McSweeney and Matthew Doyle, on the side of the man who sacked Sir Chris Wormald, sacked Sir Ollie Robbins, Sue Gray? Is that what they came to Parliament for? This is not a matter of party loyalty. It is a matter of what each and every one of us believes is right. They are being asked to defend a man who has let the country down, he has let Parliament down, and let's be honest, he has let the Labour Party down. So I say to Labour MPs today, you can defend the Prime Minister today, and there are enough of you to get through the vote, but you will be complicit in a shameful abandoning of promises made to the electorate, promises every Labour MP stood on. It is up to them what kind of MP they choose to be.
Well, we know that after Kemi Badenoch said that, there was a vote within the last sort of half an hour, 45 minutes in Parliament, and 335 MPs backed Starmer, 223 went against him, 15 Labour rebels or so, often just the usual suspects, people like Richard Bergen, who's absolutely no love for Keir Starmer, Emma Lewell as well, a few others like John McDonnell. Another dramatic thing that happened in Parliament today was what Morgan McSweeney was saying. He's the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff. He resigned over the Mandelson affair. Quite a lot of interesting information there on that. And particularly when he said he realised what was said. I was listening to this at the time, and I texted one of our contributors actually on this programme and said that this particular next thing would be the soundbite that Morgan McSweeney wanted everybody to talk about, because it concerns Epstein, it concerns his lack of judgment, and he comes out of it reasonably well. Let's just play a little bit about what Morgan McSweeney said about realising the extent of the relationship between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein.
The nature of the relationship that I understood he had with Epstein was not a close friendship. How I understood it at the time was a passing acquaintance that he regretted having, and that he apologised for. What has emerged since then was way, way, way worse than I had expected at the time. And it was when I saw the pictures, when I saw the Bloomberg questions in September 2025, I have to say it was like a knife through my soul. I did not expect that level of connection that he was talking about there.
He also talked about his own judgment in appointing and arranging for Peter Mandelson to be appointed in the first place. He said that was a mistake. This is what Morgan McSweeney told Dame Emily Thornberry and other members of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee.
What I did do was make a recommendation based on my judgment that Mandelson's experience, relationships and political skills could serve the national interest in Washington at an important moment. That judgment was a mistake.
Morgan McSweeney, the first time many people have heard his voice. I've only actually met him once briefly, but certainly he has not been a public figure in many ways, much written about, much talked about. What did you make of the evidence today, Phil Dave?
Well, where on earth do you start? I mean, one thing that was quite interesting that McSweeney said there, which I picked up straight away, is that he used the expression it was way, way, way worse than expected. So expected it to be bad then. So still went on based on what was found to say, okay, yeah, this guy would make a great US ambassador. That in itself doesn't paint a very good picture. In terms of what I make of from today, I think the summary is that the corruption, the lies, and the if you want, I don't really like the term, but the boys club is just laid bare for everyone to see.
Who's corrupt?
Well, evidently, I would say that our parliament, our political elite clearly sort of think that it's okay that the Prime Minister has gone in to appoint someone like Mandelson in such a top-notch position and represent this country in the way he did.
But he has the right to do that, has he not? Even though he says it's a mistake. It's not corrupt to do that, though, is it?
No, the corruption is that clearly, I think most Labour MPs today must know how bad this looks to the public, and that the public, at the very least, would like Starmer to face consequences for it, even if he still remains PM. But to actually gather around him and protect him like this, I just think it looks ridiculous. They can't possibly think that this is a good look for politicians today.
Does anybody actually think that, Sebastian?
Think what, sorry?
That it's a good look?
No, of course not. Look, has this been damaging? Definitely it's been damaging. Does he regret this? Definitely he regrets this. But what we're forgetting in all of this is that politicians, ideally, are paid to take risks. And when those risks come off, we say, you're a genius, fantastic, you've saved us all. And when they don't, we castigate them like we are now.
But a blind man on a galloping horse could have seen that Peter Mandelson was going to be difficult. I know you're not defending that decision necessarily,
yeah.
But there's a difference between leadership and saying, come with me, this is a good idea. You might not think this is a good idea, but it is a good idea, and actually appointing someone who is, from the start, going to be very, very difficult. I found it very interesting what Morgan McSweeney said as well in regard to, he said, well, who was putting it about that Peter Mandelson was going to be ambassador? And he said the first person to mention it and to speak to a lot of people and indeed the press was Peter Mandelson.
Yeah, I mean, the rub is that he did, by all accounts, quite a good job when he was ambassador. That's the awkward truth here, despite all of his shortcomings.
Some people say it was a snake pit in Washington and he was a snake.
Well, that's it. You might well make that argument. But look, I think there's a reason that we are being out-entrepreneured by the Americans. We're being out-infrastructured by the Chinese. We are losing grip of all of these important parts of our nation because when politicians get it wrong, we throw them out. And when they give it a go, well, they don't even give it a go. Look at HS2. Look at where we are with it. It feels like I'm getting off topic, but this is all linked.
I mean, HS2 has been around for a long time.
The only one who's been thrown out are the people that Starmer's sacked. Other than that, no one's gone.
Well, no, I'm going back further. I'm talking about the Tories as well. They were given such short shrift.
History now. So
no, but it's important
but it's a relevant
because it's part
point,
of a trend. And it's a trend that we are at risk of continuing. If the Labour Party does decide to throw Starmer out, he will not be the first Prime Minister who's met that fate in recent years.
But Margaret Thatcher didn't make mistakes in the same way as Starmer has made mistakes. He stumbled from crisis to another. She said, U-turn if you want, the lady's not for turning. I'm not saying for a second that Tony Blair didn't make mistakes, Theresa May, of course, David Cameron. Of course they all made mistakes, but they built up enough of, certainly Cameron, Blair and Thatcher had built up enough resilience and enough of a power base to actually survive when they did make some mistakes. And Starmer just hasn't done that. And it comes back to my key point about Starmer. I don't hate him. I don't think he's necessarily an evil person. I think he's made some really, really bad mistakes because he doesn't understand the process and he doesn't understand politics.
I think there's something there about him not being a natural politician. For the majority of his career, he's been a public servant, not a Westminster operator. And that is, in a sense, a weakness. But I think what he's also inherited is a very difficult economic picture and therefore a very impatient voter base. He went to the polls on the promise of change. I think there was an implication that change was going to come quickly. It patently wasn't. And so everything he does fuels that frustration and a sense that he can't get this right, when any Prime Minister from any party in his position with that inheritance would have the same struggles.
So I would agree that he has inherited a mess, no doubt about it.
It's also a huge majority.
However, I think that there's only so long we can hear inherited a mess without saying, OK, fine, we buy into that. That's absolutely true. There's one heck of a state this country is in, and I dare say that we could probably spend the next 3 hours debating on how we remedy that. But in terms of actually doing something to clear it up, they're not very good at explaining their thought process. They kind of sort of come out with what feels like ideas just for the heck of it to say, all right, well, we're trying something. We're doing, oh, that didn't work. Let's U-turn. Let's go back on it. Do you think maybe there's something in that the government could do a little bit more to explain to the layman out there and the voters that actually there is reason behind what they're doing? Because I personally can't see it, and I don't think I'm that politically stupid.
I think that's quite a valid criticism. And look, I see it because I spend a lot of time thinking about it. And I think it's about security and the idea that you can feel safe in your home, renters' rights, you can feel safe in your job, workers' rights, you can feel safe with your children going to school and being fed and all the rest of it. And so I do see a threat there.
Sorry to interrupt you. In the last 10 seconds, you have given me 3 reasons why Labour has done a good job.
Yeah.
Those 10 seconds are more convincing to me. Those are 3 policies that if I was a Labour voter, which I'm not, but if I was a Labour voter, they would appeal to me.
Yeah.
Okay, coming into these elections in 9 days' time. I have not heard Keir Starmer have a soundbite at 10 seconds as convincing as that.
Thank you very much.
I mean, you're an outgoing councillor. Why is it that you, and why are you so great? Why is it that you and some others can sum this up, can communicate and can say that in a way that the Prime Minister of this country cannot?
It's a really good question, and I think it does come back to this failure of storytelling. And everybody, whether you're on the left or the right, if you're forced to make one criticism of this government, I think it comes back to that. And it's about pulling together. And I see it, and I think that's why so many us on the left are so frustrated, because we see what's happening, because we watch it, we're left-wing nerds, we're interested in this stuff, but we don't see it getting pushed out there, and we don't see people really grasping it. And that is a great source of frustration.
I mean, he is a bit of an embarrassment as a Prime Minister, let's be honest.
I don't agree with that at all.
But you've just said that he can't sort of explain what he's doing.
I've pinpointed
you can't say that he actually can't sort of sell the idea.
On Phil's point about the fact that there are major issues here and they talk about inheriting things and all the rest of it, they didn't inherit a Mandelson problem. They created a Mandelson problem.
Of course, but that comes back to the idea of taking risks. And look, if you've got Trump in the White House and you need somebody to go and build relationships with him, we know how important the relationship between the UK and the US is, whatever you want to call it.
We do.
Well, quite, and with a capricious, mercurial president, you want to make sure that you can send somebody, as you say, equally of that nature. And I don't think it was a bad call. I think what came out afterwards was obviously terrible, and with all hindsight, we know it was an awful idea. But if I were in that room, can I honestly say I would have vetoed that decision? I don't know that I would have.
Phil?
I just think even I can't believe I'm saying this, but even if you put the Epstein stuff to one side, it's not as though Mandelson is squeaky clean. And OK, fair enough, Trump might not be squeaky clean, but I'm not worried about America. I'm worried about this country and representatives of.
Our national interest needed his argument anyway was our national interest, a trade deal. You got someone who's say what you like about Peter Mandelson. He can be an effective operator. He got various trade deals. He was an EU trade commissioner. He understands America, and he had some credentials anyway to go across there and to do the job. That's why he was appointed.
Look, he can give whatever justification he wants, but I just personally refuse to believe that there aren't more appropriate, and this is not just saying it with hindsight, it was never even at the time. I remember thinking, really, Mandelson? Are you sure? I actually, initially, funnily enough, when I first heard that, I genuinely thought the reporters that I heard it got it wrong.
Oh, really?
Because I thought, why? Why on earth Mandelson? But you can't seriously tell me that there aren't some more in the way convincing
Karen Pierce would have been the obvious one, but the guy who's in at the moment, who is meant to be the safe pair of hands, there's actually this story, I don't know if you've seen this story this evening, about him being asked 2 months ago about whether there was a special relationship, and he said there's only one special relationship, and that is between the United States and Israel. I wonder what you make of that. See that story?
Yeah, I did. Only that headline, and yes. I gather he said more as well.
Christian Turner, he said America's only special relationship is probably Israel, not the UK, and said the phrase is quite nostalgic, it's backwards looking, and there's a lot of baggage about it. I think there's probably only one country that has a special relationship with the United States, and that is probably Israel.
I mean, look, I wouldn't agree with that wholeheartedly, but if you analyse the last couple of months and you look at the operation that's gone on and the two countries that were in hock with each other in their campaign in Iran, it was the US and Israel.
Quite a number of differences though as well. Just a thought from you, Phil, on that.
I don't know how on earth to summarise a reaction to that. I mean, let me put it this way. It's just, to me, blindingly obvious. It doesn't understand what Israel and America are trying to achieve, and I don't think I need to go more to it than that, because we'll be here forever otherwise.
And we have to take a break. We will do that, and we'll talk about other issues. Whatever you think, do get in touch. Mark in Solihull says, great show, Peter. Thank you. There's only one thing left to do. The people of this country need to get real, get together, take over Parliament and hold these sick individuals, lock them in the Tower of London for treason. We need to take over this country, says Mark. Well, Mark, I am not in any way endorsing any illegal action whatsoever. What I would, well, I'm not actually allowed to say what I want to say. All I would point, because of the electoral period that is here in the electoral law, all I would say is I would draw your attention perhaps to the fact that there's an election next week. Monica in Sheffield says, I presume we live in a democracy, however the Commons does not. This is two-tier democracy. Plenty more to discuss with Sebastian and with Phil and with you. Coming up, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we're about 20 minutes away from the King on that state visit to America, speaking to Congress. We'll bring you a bit of that, certainly. We'll also speak to an American political expert and indeed Israel's spokesman at the United Nations on that, on a number of other issues. One thing that has been affected by the war in Iran is BP's profits. They have more than doubled as the Iran war has sent oil prices soaring. Certainly if you're a car driver, as I know many people are, many people listening in their cars right now to this broadcast will know just how expensive petrol and diesel have got, although I know it's eased off slightly in recent days. It was last week Nigel Howard, the excellent photographer, who has sent me a picture that he had found from Chelsea in London. Now, okay, that's a really expensive part of the country, if not the most expensive, where diesel was £2.99 a litre. Yes, really. Now BP reaping the whirlwind of that. We're on this debate desk with Phil Dave and with Sebastian Salek. Phil, what's your reaction to that? Well done, BP. Off you go and have big Caribbean holidays. No doubt what you're about to say.
Look, I strongly suspect that you would be shocked to learn I don't have a problem per se with companies making profit, but I think at a time like this when
there's profits and there's profiteering.
Exactly. So I think at a time when it is widely known how people are really struggling, before the Iran war even really properly kicked off in the way it has recently, really struggling to actually sort of make ends meet in this country, and a large part of that is being able to drive themselves around and get to where they need to go in their cars, especially some of the older vehicles which take much more petrol in the first place, or diesel. There is just something that really bites about this, and I was going to use other words that I can't use on air, but it's utterly distasteful, the fact that they have announced more than doubling of profits. You know, they could have very easily, even for shareholders, turned around and just said, you know what, now's probably not the best time.
They have to announce their profits. They have to.
No,
that's the law.
of course they've got to announce profits, but what I mean is the fact they've announced they've more than doubled. That's what I'm getting at. So of course they've got to announce.
But they've got to put the information in the public domain. You can't blame BP for saying factual information.
No. I'm not blaming BP for factual information. I'm blaming them for turning around and for maybe not turning around and saying, actually, do you know what? Let's pump some of this money, no pun intended, back into lowering the prices at the pumps, just so that our customers don't suffer as much. Because actually the irony is, if they would have done that, they probably would have even made even more profit if they were the petrol station that was seen to be keeping the prices deliberately lower than their rivals.
Knowing Phil Day for 5.5 years, I know that pun was entirely intended. You know, as you know, Phil, I hate puns. Wordplay is just something not my cup of tea at all. Sebastian, what do you make stop it? What do you make of BP's profits?
Look, Phil, I think you make a lot of good points, to be honest. For me, this is an issue that is very squarely the people versus the oil majors, and you have to pick a side. If you were going to jump into the camp of we must let BP have their profits, then you are taking that money away from working people who need it more than a large energy company and their shareholders right now. And let's not forget, I mean, I was looking at the BP share price since the 24th of February 22, which was the day that Russia went into Ukraine. Their share price is up by 50%. So they have not suffered because of this. And it's also worth mentioning that this is only a windfall on their UK extraction, whereas the majority of their work happens globally. So this is a very, very targeted and very, very limited tax on BP and its other colleagues, which we should also acknowledge. Which will have a positive benefit.
It's just at the very least distasteful. That's it. That's the only way I can describe it. Is that you think of how people are really feeling the pinch of prices going sky high, allegedly because of the war, allegedly because of the Strait of Hormuz.
I mean, that is part of it. That is part of it. It's not allegedly. It is part of it. It's demonstrably part of it.
It is a part of it, but it clearly doesn't seem to dent the petrol companies' profits. And
it's supply. There's less supply, so they jack up the prices.
Yeah, but again,
straightforward supply and demand.
It is, but the supplies in this country, we've heard from numerous people, are not as bad as they might otherwise be. You know, we're not necessarily quite at the point where suddenly there's going to be no more petrol left.
But again, that's supply. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, said the performance of energy companies was exactly why we extended the energy profits levy to make sure that windfall profits could be taxed appropriately. BP and other oil and gas companies play a really important part in the energy mix, she told the House of Commons, but said it was important windfall taxes are set properly. Windfall taxes, does that solve the problem, Sebastian?
It's part of the problem, isn't it? And it's an important part of the problem. We're probably going to need more intervention. We've seen low-level intervention on oils, haven't we? On is it cooking oils or burning oils? There's a certain type they use in Northern Ireland that we've seen some support around.
I think it's home heating oil, isn't it?
Home heating, that's the one.
Because lots of people who live in rural parts of this country will know, but you know, paid up member of the Metropolitan Elite like yourself won't know. Glad you laughed. Won't know that a lot of people just have an oil tank outside their home, and that is not everybody, but an awful lot of people. For example, in Northern Ireland, where there has been some support on this, as you correctly said.
So we've seen some intervention there. We've seen some intervention also, a similar windfall tax on renewable energy companies, I think in the last couple of days. So there's a patchwork playing out. What I find really interesting is this resistance around fuel duty. And I worry that this might snowball and become another winter fuel for Labour, because they're standing firm for now. That levy is ending in September. They have time to act, and I think this is a real opportunity for the opposition to make a lot of noise and get the public on side. So I'm concerned that maybe they are dragging their feet there.
So this is where I think we will slightly differ, in the sense that with the whole idea of windfall tax, it doesn't really solve anything, because it doesn't necessarily help those actually going to the pump and filling up. what it helps is the Chancellor rubbing her hands and saying, oh, I've got somewhere else I might be able to plug that imaginary £22 billion black hole I've just come up with. Do you know what I mean? That's where this really doesn't sort of, to me, solve anything. I think that you might be forgiven for saying that a windfall tax could be a punishment for those companies who decide to profiteer off of this situation, but I don't see it actually benefiting those who it needs to benefit.
I don't think it's about punishment, and I don't think they're deciding to profiteer. They're simply selling their commodity at the market price. They're not setting that price. But I do think it benefits because that's money that's coming to the Exchequer that's needed. I don't think there are any invented black holes at play here. But the alternative, if you want to provide support, is you borrow that money, and we've done that again and again and again. We did it radically during COVID.
We don't do that. No, cut.
It's a very good way of avoiding borrowing more money.
Lots of people getting in touch on McSweeney. Nicola in Norfolk says Morgan McSweeney's evidence was a total crock, and I don't believe a word he said. He and Starmer are well suited to each other. Stephen in Bristol says Morgan McSweeney is so slimy. If he was in my garden, I would be sprinkling salt on him. Gosh, and he blinks more than a Belisha beacon. What is that?
Oh,
don't know what that is.
Well, I mean, a beacon is obviously a type of light, but I don't know what a Belisha.
I don't know. Can you Google that for me, Phil? Balisha. Hopefully, it's not something naughty. Elaine says, come off at Sebastian. There's a risk, and then there's knowingly appointing the best pal of the world's worst paedophile. Nobody buys that number 10 didn't have the information about Mandelson that everyone and their dog had seen in the media for years, and that was enough of a warning sign to steer clear of that man. And Graham says, I'm sick of hearing the public are bored of this. Basically say we are not sufficiently intelligent enough to understand what's going on in government. I watched Morgan McSweeney today for almost 1 hour and 20 minutes as a day off for a change. I couldn't believe what he said. After the vetting, the press would basically inform him and the government if anything else would show up, and nobody on the panel picked up on this comment. Well, Graham, I think it's a very good point, actually, that, and here I hope at Talk Anyway, we don't, I can't speak for other stations, but I try my very, very best not to patronise people, to explain things to people, yes, but there will be plenty of people, I was one of them, who listened for quite a long time. It was all on Julia Hartley-Brewer's programme earlier. I was listening from home to that about his evidence, and you know, you're an intelligent lot. You know what's going on here, and you might not know every single bit of it. You might, like Graham, not have listened to 1 hour and 20 minutes of it, but you know the fundamentals, and you know why this is all a bit wrong and why there's something rotten in the state of Denmark. Phil, do we know what a Belisha beacon is?
Yeah, quick question. Sebastian, do you drive?
No.
Right, so then you're forgiven for this. You and I have no excuse. A Belisha beacon is at a crossing. Typically, I think it's the Pelican crossings. You know where they've got those black and white poles with the yellow lights on top of them? That's a Belisha beacon.
I didn't know it was a Belisha beacon. Every day is a school day. The best bit about this job is that you learn something new every day. So there we are. Lots more to discuss, including why the UK has the wealthy Europe's highest rate of young adults not in work or study. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about whether Paddington or David Attenborough should be on the banknotes. Apparently, lots of people suggesting that Winston Churchill should be in the banknotes. Spoiler alert, he's already on the banknotes. And if you nick chips, do they taste better? The answer is yes. Stay with us.
I hope I wouldn't have used that. Well, certainly I don't remember trying to get any job for my mates.
Can you get a job? Can you help get a job for ex's mates? But don't tell the Foreign Secretary.
I don't think it's completely surprising that the Prime Minister would be so sensitive about the way in which he was dealing with a member of his senior team, and particularly a Director of Communications who's in minute-by-minute contact with the media, that he would want that kept to a very, very tight group of people at the time.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots more to discuss between now and 10 o'clock, including whether stolen chips feel and taste better. I think they probably do, actually. I've stolen a few chips over my time, it must be said. Is it a male thing as well? Is it more a man thing than a woman thing? 3 men in the studio this evening, I think. I don't know if you identify as something else there, Phil, no?
I would like to identify as a Belisha beacon.
Would you? Would you? Yes.
We'll start blinking.
Yes. Because I primarily wear monochrome and the brightness comes from on top.
Black and white, yeah, certainly.
But no, in all seriousness, I think in terms of... Can we just clarify, when you say nicking chips, you're talking about from other people's plates
as
opposed
to
going into a chippy and
no,
just
not
saying,
not going into to a chippy and
give me a large cod and chips or else.
Yes, exactly. Of course they have that quite a lot. You know, CERN in Switzerland, they often have that on a Friday. They have fish and chips. Right then, let's talk about the UK having wealthy Europe's third highest rate of young adults not in work or study. Why is this happening, Phil?
Well, it's very simple. I think it's because the messaging to young people is not right, and it hasn't been right for many, many years now. And again, successive governments are to blame here. Look, what kind of message does it send out to younger people that we have a load of individuals, regardless of whether it's at top-level businesses, whether it's at the state-funded organisations, whatever it is, that we are prepared to import cheap labour because it's cheap, rather than actually train up our own, invest in young people and say, do you know what, there are actually some limitations to whether or not someone can be a doctor, a lawyer, or anything like that. For so many years we've heard how young people can be whatever they want to be. Well, I regret to tell you, no, you can't. I would have absolutely loved to be some sort of surgeon. Sadly, I am nowhere near clever enough to do it, and I accept that. But there's nothing wrong with it. There's literally nothing wrong with me saying I'm not clever enough to be a medic. So what we need to be doing is encouraging younger people to work within their particular parameters and bring out the best in them, rather than just shoving them to one side, getting them destined to be a life on benefits or what have you, and saying, just don't bother, it's fine.
Sebastian?
Interesting to see what the Resolution Foundation had to say. They pointed to rising ill health, particularly mental health, which I can definitely relate to and see around me. And they also pointed to this requirement not needing to work necessarily if you are going onto the benefit system. So this idea that some people are kind of parked and abandoned, which is a real shame, and I think benefits no one. The other part of it, I think, is also that you are at the moment not incentivised to try to work, because if you do and it doesn't work out, you lose your benefits, and that's a loophole that Labour is trying to plug. So there is engineering to be done there.
Well, here's one heck of an incentive. Don't give them the benefits until it's absolutely proven that they can't work.
Well, they would say the system is there and not...
It may well be, but it shouldn't be.
Okay. We'll get into this a little bit more perhaps later in the programme. A few thoughts on it. Maybe you're a young person trying to find work, or someone who can't work, whatever your thoughts are on this, or maybe an employer. 0344 499 1000. Lots on Belisha beacons. Anthony's been in touch. Anthony says, tell Phil Davis on a zebra crossing, just in case you three don't know what it's a black and white stripy thing. Thank you, Anthony. Neil Smith says, I've turned over. If 3 clever people don't know what a Belisha beacon is, what hope is there for this channel? Neil, I am obviously very stupid and very upset by your comment, which you won't have seen read out. I'm just going to wipe away my tears.
Sorry, can I point out, we're not DVLA radio.
I'm going to wipe.
I never said I was clever.
I'm going to wipe away my tears with my master's degree from Oxford University. Anyway, Ian, piece of paper is quite. The certificate's quite absorbent. Ian in Northern Ireland. Thank you to him. Who has said that Leslie Hoare Belisha, 1893 to 1957, was a prominent British National Liberal politician and cabinet minister known for modernising road safety as Minister for Transport, notably introducing the Belisha beacons. So there we are.
I mean, that is fascinating, given that most Liberal politicians don't believe everything is black and white. So there you go.
Phil.
So glad they got you in.
Yeah.
So am I.
Phil has come to the rescue this evening because we had someone to drop out. Now, maybe we should put him on a banknote. What do you think, Sebastian?
Why not? You'd look great.
Phil Dave on a banknote.
Framing you up there visually.
That's it.
That's my job.
Tell me your thoughts on whether we should have Paddington, David Attenborough or Winston Churchill on banknotes.
What a glorious conversation. Do you know what I really like about this is what we're really talking about here is the symbols that we associate with Britain. And what I find so heartening is that we've put aside politicians largely, we've put aside monarchs, and we're talking about the space around us. We had wildlife and national parks as the top 2 suggestions that
Some
came
people
through.
want the sycamore gap tree on a fiver or a tenner.
And what a thesis to explore. Why do we feel so heartbroken about the felling of a tree? We have such a relationship to place in this country that we do not talk about, because every time we talk about our history, we talk about governments, we talk about kings and queens. Wars, and these people are really the anomalies and the outliers of history. We can't relate to them at all.
The kings and queens, of course, aren't quite an essential part of the history. I mean, I dare say
all of those things are wars and politicians and all the rest of it. But yes, it is interesting in terms of uniting symbols. The thing I found most interesting about this report was people who said Winston Churchill should be on the fiver. Winston Churchill is on the fiver.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Does this actually talk about how little we use cash these days?
That certainly
and actually,
highlights
doesn't matter who's on a banknote?
Well, I mean, I must admit, I think there are slightly more important things than who's on a banknote. I will say one thing: I certainly don't believe in political gestures just to rub people up the wrong way, so I don't care very much for that. And you know, we've got a classic example of that right here in London. You look at the ridiculous names and politically charged names that were given recently to the London Overground system. Now, as much as I appreciate that doesn't mean much to a lot of listeners, so I'm not going to bore you too much.
82% of our viewers listen outside London, but totally there are those woke lines.
Yeah, absolutely. The point being is that you just know from the names of them that they weren't done because necessarily they absolutely deserve to be every single day reminders in this great country. I'm not saying that they're not important moments in history. It's still the wrong choice for using them. However, let's put that to one side. It's more about, I'd say, just choosing something that's nice and neutral and means something to everyone. That's more the point.
A universal symbol is, of course, the Great British Chip.
Yes.
Do you think, this is a news story today, yes, really, about whether nicking someone else's chips is something that they taste better? It means they taste better. Sebastian?
I love this. And first of all, fantastic to see a study entirely funded, conducted and organised by seagulls. We must assume, if we're now doing this kind of science. But they have discovered that jeopardy makes food taste better. I mean, the peep show scholars among us will know that the secret ingredient is, of course, crime.
Yes.
But the idea is that the harder it is to obtain the food, the better it tastes.
Although this is the Russian Medical Academy. I mean, is this a psyop?
Well, I put it to you that I think what you're talking about is the bits of bacteria lingering on people's fingers that you can't quite see when you pick up someone else's chip that they've obviously touched. That's what there you go.
I worked with someone who would never share their crisps, and I didn't really think about it, but she said, like, you don't want someone's fingers with their bacteria and all that. But stolen chips just taste better, don't they, Phil?
Well, it tastes better if I don't have to pay for it, I guess. If that's the same thing, maybe.
Maybe.
But, yeah.
But I mean, it's fascinating.
If I don't have to cook it, that tastes better.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Well, or someone else paying for something as well is always lovely. The finding extends our understanding of how everyday transgressions engage reward circuits, offering explanations for impulsive behaviour and consumer psychology. Are you a thief of chips?
No, do you know what? It's one of those unwritten rules that really bemused me growing up. That it's socially acceptable to take other people's chips, isn't it? If somebody's
isn't a male thing as well? The three men here. Is it a male versus female thing?
Oh, it might be.
Has a woman ever stolen your chips?
I don't think so. Is that euphemism?
It wasn't when I said it, but maybe it can be. Phil, has a woman ever stolen your chips?
Couldn't possibly tell you.
We'll leave it there. Thank you both very much. I mean, it sounds wrong, but it wasn't really meant to be. So anyone who's had a woman steal their chips, please do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Loads to debate this evening. We'll talk more about Morgan McSweeney. We'll hear from the King as well, a bit of what he's saying to Congress. We'll also speak to Jonathan Harunov. He is Israel's international spokesman to the UN. Lots to discuss with him about everything that's going on in the world, including in America too. So stay with us here on Talk. Thanks, Sebastian. Thanks, Phil.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's just gone 8 o'clock. This is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. Loads to talk about this evening, whether it's Morgan McSweeney, whether it's Starmer hanging on with that parliamentary vote a little bit earlier on. In a few minutes, the King is going to address Congress on the state visit. He's in Washington at the moment, and Congress, you can see there on the screen if you're watching, congressmen and women getting ready to speak to him. We also have Israel's international spokesman to the UN in the studio. Jonathan Harunoff will be speaking to us in a second about so many different aspects of Iran-linked anti-Semitic attacks in London. We're talking about that. We're talking about the status quo in Iran. What about the UN and what do they do and what are they actually for as well? There's a big issue about these international institutions, I think, especially when it comes to Israel. There's so much to discuss. We're talking as well, not just about the King, but also about McSweeney. As I say, we'll get to that. Rachel Cunliffe from the New Statesman is going to speak to us. We'll talk about the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill. I promised you last night we were going to talk about that. Labour won that vote last night. We'll be speaking to the Shadow Defence Minister a little bit later on. We'll also talk to a psychotherapist about how to find out if your partner is cheating, what the signs are, especially in this technological new world. And chips pinched from a friend's plate really do taste better, according to science. So it must be true. Lots to discuss in all of that, and particularly Sam in Lancashire says, I'm the woman that would steal a chip. Yes, they taste better. There's always one that looks better than the rest. Can't disagree with that. Whatever your thoughts on whatever topic, whether it is high politics or low drama of stealing chips, let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. We'll bring you the King in just a few minutes' time as well. So stay with us here on Talk. Well, we're just waiting for the King. We're going to keep those for that footage, that live footage from Washington, D.C., from the House of Representatives, where he will be talking to a joint session of Congress. It's a rare honour, and the King will be doing that very, very soon. Interesting diplomatic waves made earlier by the current ambassador to America, who comments surfacing about him saying that the relationship actually wasn't that special, and the only special relationship that there actually is, he says, is the Financial Times is reporting, is actually between the United States and Israel. Well, Israel's international spokesman to the United Nations, Jonathan Harunoff, is in the studio with me. Jonathan, good evening to you. Great to see you.
Great to be with you, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Here from New York. I will preemptively apologise to you that we may well have to go to King Charles, but we'll keep talking until he starts talking anyway. Maybe you could give me your thoughts about this. How helpful, unhelpful, how difficult is it when you have reporting of an American, a diplomat in America, the UK ambassador, saying that the only relationship, the only special relationship, is between Israel and the United States?
So it appears these comments were leaked today, but the actual comments were made about 10 weeks ago, while the ambassador, before he took on this position, was speaking to a sixth form class. So we'd have to ask him for clarification exactly what he meant. I think the scenes that we're going in and out of in the United States demonstrate just how special the relationship does exist between the United Kingdom and the United States. Of course, Israel also has a very important relationship with the United States, one that is based on shared Western democratic values, understanding of what democracy and freedom looks like, and understanding of what terrorism and forces that try and take all of the freedoms that we hold dear to us away from us. So there's definitely a number of important relationships here, but we'd have to ask the Foreign Office and, of course, the ambassador what he meant by those comments.
There's lots to get into in all of this, and certainly when it looks to the thought, should just say the King is shaking hands with various members of Congress. I expect he'll speak in a minute or two's time. But just briefly, Jonathan, is it helpful or unhelpful for Israel to have have been, at least it's suggested that they have this special relationship? They haven't exactly been in lockstep with the United States when it comes to Iran, for example. Just briefly, if you would.
Well, both the United States and Israel have recognised for a very long time that there is a very imminent and existential and serious threat posed by the Islamic Republic, and it's a threat that they pose to their own people. They've beaten and brutalised the people of Iran for 47 years. And they've threatened Jewish communities, as we've seen recently in London, communities in the United States, dissidents in the United States. They've, of course, sent missiles and proxies to attack Israel. So there's definitely an understanding that there's a threat all around, and that's why the United States and Israel launched operations Roaring Lion and Midnight Hammer when they did at the end of February.
And we'll get into that more in just a second, but I want to go straight to Congress, where the King is about to speak. He's received a standing ovation. Here is King Charles III. They've cut the sign just where there's applause rather unhelpfully, but there is very loud applause. We can see, if you're watching on the screen, the King, oh there we go, the King is at Congress, Queen Camilla beside him, behind him the Speaker of the House of Representatives and the Vice President, who is of course J.D. Vance, and he is in his rightful place in Congress there as well. This long ovation for the King just before he speaks. He is about to address Congress. He's on this state visit to America. His Majesty the King about to put his words across, and no doubt the special relationship on the links between the two countries under strain politically, but perhaps not diplomatically.
I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you His Majesty Charles III.
Yet more applause. He's giving a bit of a wave. Now he's about to start. Well, let's hear at least a little bit of what the King is saying to Congress. If this applause ever stops for him, Queen Camilla looking very happy and radiant there, standing beside him as well. Everybody now sitting down, ready to listen to the King.
Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of Congress, representatives of the American people across all states, territories, cities, and communities. I would like, if I may, to take this opportunity to express my particular gratitude to you all for the great honor of addressing this joint meeting of Congress, and on behalf of the Queen and myself, to thank the American people for welcoming us to the United States to mark this semi-quincentennial year of the Declaration of Independence. And for all of that time, aren't you lucky? And for all of that time, our destinies as nations have been interlinked. As Oscar Wilde said, we have really everything in common with America nowadays, except, of course, language. So, ladies and gentlemen, we meet in times of great uncertainty, in times of conflict from Europe to the Middle East, which pose immense challenges for the international community and whose impact is felt in communities the length and breadth of our own countries. We meet, too, in the aftermath of the incident not far from this great building that sought to harm the leadership of your nation and to foment wider fear and discord. Let me say with unshakable resolve, such acts of violence will never succeed. Whatever our differences, whatever disagreements we may have, we stand united in our commitment to uphold democracy, to protect all our people from harm, and to salute the courage of those who daily risk their lives in the service of our countries. Standing here today, it is hard not to feel the weight of history on my shoulder, because the modern relationship between our two nations and our own peoples spans not merely 250 years, but over 4 centuries. It is extraordinary to think that I am the 19th in our line of sovereigns to study with daily attention the affairs of America. So I come here today with the highest respect for the United States Congress, this citadel of democracy created to represent the voice of all American people to advance sacred rights and freedoms. Speaking in this renowned chamber of debate and deliberation, I cannot help but think of my late mother, Queen Elizabeth, who in 1991 was also afforded this signal honour and similarly spoke under the watchful eye of the Statue of Freedom above us. Today, I am here on this great occasion in the life of our nations to express the highest regard and friendship of the British people to the people of the United States. Now, as you may know, when I address my own Parliament at Westminster, we still follow an age-old tradition and take a Member of Parliament hostage, holding him or her at Buckingham Palace until I am safely returned. These days, we look after our guests rather well, to the point that they often do not want to leave. I don't know, Mr. Speaker, if there were any volunteers for that role here today. As I look back across the centuries, Mr. Speaker, there emerge certain patterns, certain self-evident truths from which we can learn and draw mutual strength. With the spirit of 1776 in our minds, we can perhaps agree that we do not always agree, at least in the first instance. Indeed, the very principle on which your Congress was founded, no taxation without representation, was at once a fundamental disagreement between us, and at the same time a shared democratic value which you inherited from us. Ours is a partnership born out of dispute, but no less strong for it. So perhaps in this example, we can discern that our nations are in fact instinctively like-minded, a product of the common democratic, legal, and social traditions in which our governance is rooted to this day. Drawing on these values and traditions, time and again, our two countries have always found ways to come together. And by Jove, Mr. Speaker, when we have found that way to agree, what great change is brought about, not just for the benefit of our peoples, but of all peoples. This, I believe, is the special ingredient in our relationship. As President Trump himself observed during his state visit to Britain last autumn, the bond of kinship and identity between America and the United Kingdom is priceless and eternal. It is irreplaceable and unbreakable.
That is the King speaking to Congress, a joint session of Congress. We'll continue to monitor that, but there's some really interesting points, I think, in that. He talked about the bond between the two countries. He talked about some of the traditions and the reason, of course, that America had its independence, its war of independence against the United Kingdom 250 years ago. This year, the 4th of July, is going to be a very, very big day for them, just as it is every year. Jonathan Harunoff is with me, Israel's international spokesman to the UN. Jonathan, you live in New York. and I just wonder, you're just here in the UK. I know you're from here, but this is something that you're well versed in the relationship between the UK and the US. What did you make of that speech?
I think it was a very powerful reminder that even though the United States and the United Kingdom, you know, they have a history that was, and a partnership that was born out of a dispute, as the King alluded to. Ever since then, they've got an extremely solid partnership, and they both value democracy, and they have these common democratic and social traditions that have really remained quite unshakable and unbreakable. And I think just the reception, the fact that the King wasn't really able to begin his speech after multiple rounds of applause, just demonstrates how powerful that bond is, and very much refutes some of the earlier reporting that we were discussing that has been, I think, dominating the news, that there isn't a special relationship. I think this is a demonstration of quite the opposite.
As a diplomat, as someone who works at the United Nations on Israel's behalf, I just wonder how much of your job is thinking, right, there's a long-term relationship between the country you represent, Israel, and the United States, and many, many other countries at the UN, of course, and Britain and many others. Of course, there's scratchy bits in between where, I'm not asking you necessarily to comment on this, but obviously the relationship between Trump and Starmer isn't fantastic at the moment. That is plain to see. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say. But the longer term bonds, you know, Charles has been talking about 250 years. The background and the history must loom large in your working life as well.
Sure. Sometimes, I mean, even with the strongest of friendships, away from diplomacy, if you're just talking about friendships, when the friendship and the relationship is so strong, oftentimes you have the comfort level to criticise one another with good intentions, constructive criticism, and of course we've been able to sense some tension that exists between President Trump and Prime Minister Starmer. Tension that doesn't actually really exist between President Trump and the King, of course. But I hope that the history and the weight of history, as the King alluded to, that really supports the United States and the United Kingdom prevails over this temporary, momentary tension that we're seeing.
Jonathan, there's loads I want to ask you about. I want to talk about Iranian-linked anti-Semitic attacks in London. I want to talk about the Iran war. I want to talk about the UN itself. It says so little about Iran, but has so much to say about Israel and what Israel is doing. I want to ask you about Lebanon. Loads to discuss with Jonathan. Don't go anywhere. We'll take a short break and we'll come back to Jonathan Harunoff. Stay with us.
I hope I wouldn't have used that. Well, certainly I don't remember trying to get any job for my mates.
Can you get a job? Can you help get a job for ex's mates? But don't tell the Foreign Secretary.
I don't think it's completely surprising that the Prime Minister would be so sensitive about the way in which he was dealing with a member of his senior team, and particularly a Director of Communications who's in minute-by-minute contact with the media, that he would want that kept to a very, very tight group of people at the time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
The King is still talking at Congress. We will, of course, make sure that anything he says that's significant we bring to you. We'll actually maybe just dip in for 20-30 seconds just to hear what he's saying right now to Congress.
For myself, the Christian faith is a firm anchor and daily inspiration that guides us, not only personally,
The King talking about his faith. Of course, he is the Supreme Governor of the Church of England, and faith and politics are things that are very much linked, particularly in America, in this country too, but in a very, very different way. As I say, if there's anything more significant the King says, we'll bring it to you. I'll tell you exactly what he says as soon as he says it. But Jonathan Harunoff is here. He's Israel's international spokesman to the UN, and it's too good an opportunity to waste because there's so many things I want to ask you about. Jonathan, thanks for being live in the studio this evening. Tell us about your view. I know you're doing a number of different engagements in London this week, and there are so many Iranian-linked anti-Semitic attacks. It must be of great concern to you.
I think it's extremely concerning, and Jewish community members that I've been meeting here have expressed a huge amount of concern, not just because of the attack itself and its linked to the regime and how close to home it is, that it's in some of the most Jewishly populated parts of London, Golders Green, Finchley and elsewhere, but the fact that you've also seen before that comments by the UK government that they don't necessarily want to become embroiled in this broader conflict, where the reality is that the conflict and the Islamic Republic and the perpetrators behind it have very much brought the conflict to Europe, to the United Kingdom shores. You cannot ignore it because it's already there, and you're already seeing terrorist groups with ties to the regime, proudly declaring that they were behind the burning down of 4 Hatzalah ambulances, vehicles designed to save human life. They were behind attempted arson attacks on synagogues, houses of prayer, perhaps trying to repeat the massacre that we saw in Heaton Park. And this is totally abhorrent, and urgent steps have to be taken to address it and to thwart it and prevent things like that from happening again.
I totally agree with you on the anti-Semitism. When it comes to the country who you work for Israel, what do you think this government, Keir Starmer's government, should do? There are clearly things you disagree with them on, recognising a state of Palestine, for example. You're at the UN. What would you like to see from this government?
I think we need to see the government listening more to its own population, first and foremost, warning signs being issued countless times by the Jewish population and other people who are allies of the Jewish people, who are saying that there are warning signs here. Not just even if you don't care about Israel, the Middle East or wherever, there are genuine, serious attacks taking place on your shore, and you have to take steps to make sure that your community feels safe, and you don't only respond after a tragedy. I think you sometimes see a tendency, whether it's in Australia or the United Kingdom, that people really kick into action. Their royal commission is set up, or you see the Prime Minister doing the rounds at Heaton Park and elsewhere after a tragedy, but the hope is that these things happen before the tragedy strikes. In terms of additional action, I think we want to see more strong leadership, instead of taking a more conciliatory approach to the Islamic Republic, negotiating and approaching them with strength as opposed to demonstrating weakness is what gets recognised and I think respected and in that part of the world.
Where are things right now? I want to talk about 3 separate things. Well, maybe just take them in turn. I want to talk about Israel and Lebanon, Hezbollah. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about where things are in Iran right now from Israel's perspective. I also want to talk a little bit about the UN itself. Maybe we'll just start with the separate but obviously related conflict between the Israeli people and Hezbollah in Lebanon. We know that there have... Just give us a situation readout of where things are right now from Israel's perspective.
From Israel's perspective, Israel has no enmity, has no beef with the people of Lebanon. It also has no enmity or beef with the people of Iran. The main stumbling block and the main obstacle that sometimes commentators often omit is that there is a terrorist organisation backed by the Islamic Republic that has taken the beautiful country of Lebanon hostage for a number of decades now, and that terrorist organisation is Hezbollah. They certainly don't respect the sovereignty, the territorial integrity of Israel, and they also don't respect the territorial integrity of Lebanon. And they've been plundering their country, the Lebanese country, and sort of plunging it into a state of war. Ever since Israel and the United States launched Operation Midnight Hammer, Roaring Lion, at the end of February, starting with the elimination of the second supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, Hezbollah sprang into action, sprang to the Islamic Republic's defence, and since March the 2nd of 2026, it's launched more than 10,000 missiles, drones and rockets at Israel's northern borders.
And Israel's been fighting back, and there have been Lebanese civilians who have died as a result of their attacks.
Of course, and whenever there is any victim, any citizen who's injured or harmed or killed, that's never Israel's intention, and any kind of civilian casualties are, of course, regrettable and not targeted. But the reality is that Israel is not launching these attacks for no reason. They're very oftentimes, if not always, a reaction to the myriad violations launched by Hezbollah.
So where are things with Hezbollah, and particularly with Lebanon now, because there have been negotiations taking place?
So for the first time in a very long time, there were direct negotiations taking place.
44 years, wasn't it?
Yes, taking place between Israel and Lebanon. It's extremely rare. It demonstrates that Israel wants peace, and I think it also demonstrates to an extent that Lebanon wants peace. But what Lebanon needs to do, and the Lebanese government, is they need to match their desires with sufficient action. They need to ensure that the LAF deploys necessary forces throughout Lebanon, especially in the south, and ensures that Hezbollah isn't able to use Lebanon as a launching pad to attack Israeli cities in the north. Because the reality is it's a very much unlivable for many people in the north, where they can't, they've got a matter of seconds before they can, before they have to rush to any bomb shelter, and that's not really a way to live. But bottom line is that Israel doesn't want war with the people of Lebanon. The only thing that it's targeting and trying to eliminate is the threat of Hezbollah, which has been threatening peace for the Lebanese people and threatening peace for the Israeli people.
And when it comes to Iran itself, from Israel's perspective, obviously the Americans are, we're in a very, very difficult diplomatic and military situation. How does Israel see that?
We see it through a similar lens, that the Islamic Republic has suffered significant military and leadership and infrastructural setbacks and defeat. But what the Islamic Republic is trying to do, essentially, and I think it recognises that it cannot defeat these two powerful militaries, is it's been trying to wage a war of attrition, an attritional war on the world, not just Israel and the United States, trying to hold, vital waterways like the Strait of Hormuz hostage, and assuming that other countries are going to come to the United States and beg them to enter into some kind of ceasefire agreement. But what you're also seeing is that the Islamic Republic are master negotiators, and they know what they're doing, they know how to stall, and they know how to pull the wool over some people's eyes. And I think what I urge, and other people have been urging, is to be realistic about what's actually going on. And
speaking of that realistic nature of what might come out of those negotiations, Israel has three very clear things it wants to get out of the conflict in Iran. It wants to stop them having ballistic missiles, it wants to stop them having nuclear capability, and crucially for me, and the reason I supported the actions of Israel and the actions of America personally, was because they want regime change. Donald Trump doesn't seem to talk about regime change anymore at all. Can you go through those three? Firstly, ballistic missiles, secondly, nuclear missiles, and thirdly, regime change, and tell me how likely you think that those are going to be the result of this conflict, that Israel will get what it wants?
First and foremost, what Israel and Israel especially is trying to do is eliminate a very real, immediate existential threat. That's why it launched the operation. And I think its successful operation set back the Islamic Republic's nuclear program by a significant amount of time. In terms of its ballistic missiles, I think through its own voices inside Iran, the Islamic Republic has demonstrated a desire and capabilities of using these intercontinental missiles and drones to attack not just Israel, but to attack the shores of Europe. And that goes back to our earlier conversation of why the United Kingdom and other places should act, because these very missiles can reach their shores. In terms of regime change, Israel is a staunch ally and supporter of the brave people of Iran, and it's my personal hope that the 93 million people of Iran who have been fighting for freedom for the past 47 years will be able to unlock that future. And my hope is that the people of Iran are able to mobilise and take control of a country that really has an incredible future.
I really hope that happens too, Jonathan. I 100% agree with you. How likely is it, and how much are the Americans actually committed to this?
I think you have to judge the United States based on their actions, and they've taken a number of very extraordinary actions to eliminate the threat.
They don't care about regime change, do they, honestly?
I think you would have to ask a United States official specifically about what they do care and don't care, but I'm judging them based on what they've done, and they've done more to, I think, support the people of Iran than previous administrations in the US have done, and that, I think, for that, President Trump and his administration deserve a tremendous amount of credit. But it's also important to recognise, I think, many people before this conflict and for years now have underestimated the scope and the power and the ideology of the Islamic Republic. Some people thought that it would just immediately surrender and fold after a sustained operations, and the reality is that they have a number of very unshakable ideological foundational pillars that have remained intact since 1979, that include an abhorrent and virulent hatred towards the United States and Israel, and an obsessive focus on the subjugation of women and minority groups. And they're not none of those things are negotiable. And I think again, I go back to my hope that the people of Iran are able to unlock this future that they really desire, and that we're able to distinguish between the 47-year-old Islamic Republic and the 93 million people inside Iran, the vast majority of whom don't see anything Iranian in the Islamic Republic.
Yeah, well, I'm with them, certainly, and was very, very privileged recently to speak at a rally just before the war started, actually, for the Iranian people, held in Whitehall. Very, very kind invitation from them. And I said, look, I'm not Jewish, I'm not Iranian, I'm not Israeli, but I'm with you. And my view hasn't changed on that. I just hope that regime change does happen, and I do worry it won't. Jonathan, what is it like for you? What's life like being, you know, in Mamdani's New York at the United Nations with lots of different nations that really, really hate Israel and really don't like you because you work for Israel and you're a spokesman for them? The UN seems to have an awful lot to say about many, many issues, including basically everything Israel says and does. Not a huge amount to say about the Iranians to some degree. We saw the Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, for example, before the war, celebrating the 47th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. We've seen, even in the last 48 hours, Iran elected to another position within the United Nations, which is antithetical to their views on women and human rights. It must be a strange world you live in.
It can sometimes feel surreal. The reality is that the United Nations consists of 193 member states. Sometimes it feels like it just consists of one member state, Israel, given the myopic and obsessive focus on what Israel does and says. What I've also noticed is that the United Nations seems to operate at two different modes. It operates at warp speed when it wants to very quickly condemn or convene an emergency meeting around something Israel has said or done, or something pertaining to Gaza, and these are often very important topics. But my wish is that warp speed was applied to all issues. When it comes to the people of Iran, and if we go back to December 2025 and January 2026, which were the bloodiest months in the Islamic Republic's 47 years, it took the United Nations about 3 weeks to issue any kind of statement of condemnation. The Secretary General, it took him 3 weeks to issue a statement to say that he was shocked to hear what was happening when there were tens of thousands of Iranian people being slaughtered. And it's something that I haven't quite been able to wrap my head around, why there's so much indifference and apathy towards the people of Iran, and the regime seems to be taking up a lot of these prominent committee chair positions on the Commission of State of Women's Rights and
that's just through the looking glass.
And it's very bizarre. And I'd have some personal experience that also illustrate that there is a sense of apathy towards the people of Iran. When I know we've spoken about the book before, but when right before I published Unveiled, Inside Iran's Women, Life, Freedom Revolt, my publicist went to the United Nations bookstore. They have a massive bookstore in their basement, to see if they wanted to stock this book that's written by someone affiliated with the United Nations on topic of human rights, women's rights. Of course, there's a huge section of the United Nations dedicated to these topics, but they said that this verbatim was not a topic that aligns with UN global priorities. And it just, I think it goes back to the original point that there are certain human rights, women's rights that they care about. Yeah. And they had a similar response to Eli Sharabi's book Hostage. They chose not to stock it, and one only wonders what those priorities are.
Jonathan, great to talk to you. MG in Staffordshire has been in touch and says Jonathan Rudolph is brilliant, coming in to talk about sensitive, contentious issues. He handled them so well. Thank you. What a man Jonathan is doing. He mentioned his book there. Give us the full title again, Unveiled.
The book is called Unveiled, Inside Iran's Women, Life, Freedom Revolt. It's
a great book, and very proudly on my bookshelf. He's doing quite a number of events in the country over the next few days. You can look up and see what they are, including one with Caprice. So thoughts and prayers on that one. Lots to discuss. What do you think about what Jonathan said? Thank you for coming into the studio. 0344 499 1000. We're going to speak to one of my favourite commentators on Labour, Rachel Cunliffe, Associate Political Editor of the New Statesman, next, about Starmer's present and future. What do you think? 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of people getting in touch on all sorts of matters. Sean in Norway says the government is making a fortune on petrol prices and over 50% of the cost of a litre is tax. This is where the price should be reduced. BP already paying 78% tax in the UK on their assets, and the petroleum station division is separate from oil and gas. Thank you, Sean. I don't know the veracity of those stats, but I'm sure you're right. Scott says, I feel it's a bit disingenuous to criticise BP for making increased profits during an energy crisis. Nobody was talking about helping BP when they were facing ruin. They didn't cause the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, and they're benefited mainly because their assets are mainly US based and not linked to Iran, so it's easier for them to maintain trading in the market. Thank you for that. Stephen Millings in Belfast says, oh my goodness, not David Attenborough on a banknote, the most boring man on television. Proud never to have watched a single one of his shows. Churchill, obviously, he saved us from the Nazis, though we could do with his like again, says Stephen. And Angie says, great show as usual. Thank you, Angie. Cardi P, I think the nicking the chips thing may stem from when you used to open a bag of crisps in the pub and put them in the middle of the table. I still do that, and people shared. I did that last Wednesday when it was a leaving do for someone. Couldn't do that now. Not only are they pricey, but you only get 5 crisps in a packet. Also, leave my chips alone. You want some, you buy some. Well, big issues. Do stolen chips taste better? We'll get to that later on in the programme. But now I want to talk about an arguably slightly more important matter, the future of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. A very interesting debate and indeed vote in Parliament this evening, won by the Prime Minister. 335 MPs said he shouldn't face a Privileges Committee inquiry. 223 said he should, 223 said he should, 335 said he should not. Only about 15 Labour rebels. Kemi Badenoch spoke about this as well earlier on in the debate. Let's hear what the leader of the Conservatives said.
Members opposite want to pretend that this is something that only one party is doing. Can I remind them that this is a cross-party motion supported by independents, the Lib Dems, the DUP, the SNP, members from across this House. Calling this a stunt is disrespecting this House and disrespecting the Speaker. It's very obvious, listening to the media and their tweets, it's very obvious they've all been told to come here today. Tell everybody it's a stunt. Tell everybody it's a stunt. Why are they acting like sheep? Why are they acting like sheep? They should be better than that. We will be counting, by the way. Some people might even be shouting bingo at how many times people stand up and say that this is a stunt in this debate. We're looking forward to it.
Kemi Badenoch speaking earlier on. Well, one of my favourite commentators on politics in general, but particularly the Labour Party, is Rachel Cunliffe, who is Associate Political Editor at The New Statesman. We will, of course, talk about Morgan McSweeney in a minute or two, Rachel, but I just want to talk a little bit about this vote. No great thought that it wouldn't go through. The people who have voted against, or voted, the rebels anyway, people like Richard Bergen, Rebecca Long Bailey, Emma Lewell, no massive surprise there. But nonetheless, after a tumultuous day, I'm sure Keir Starmer will be breathing a sigh of relief.
Good evening. Yeah, it was a dramatic debate, but not so dramatic when the vote came down to it. Only 14 Labour rebels, but just because only a handful of them chose to rebel doesn't mean that the danger is past or that they're not feeling their frustrations in private. I thought Kemi Badenoch did quite well, and you've got to remember that a couple of weeks ago the Conservatives managed an opposition motion similar to this to get Labour backbenchers on side with the humble address motion, which means that we're now seeing all the documents and correspondence related to Peter Mandelson. So this kind of parliamentary stunt, as it were, it can work, it can be effective, but I think a week and a half out from local elections, we weren't going to expect more Labour rebels than we got today.
Very, very interesting, certainly, on Morgan McSweeney. His testament was earlier on today. I listened to all of it, as I'm sure you did as well. Lots to listen to and to digest with all of that. Let's hear a little bit about what Morgan McSweeney said about Mandelson.
What I did do was make a recommendation based on my judgment that Mandelson's experience, relationships and political skills could serve the national interest in Washington at an important moment. That judgment was a mistake.
And he talked further about the thought that he thought it was an error of judgment to advise the Prime Minister to appoint Peter Mandelson. He did basically apologise and say it was wrong. This is further evidence from Morgan McSweeney to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee in Parliament today.
The appointment of Mandelson as ambassador was a serious error of judgment. I advised the Prime Minister in support of that appointment, and I was wrong to do so. As I said in my resignation statement, I resigned because I believe responsibility should rest with those who make serious mistakes. Accountability in public life cannot apply only when it is convenient. The Prime Minister relied on my advice, and I got it wrong.
Rachel, what did you think of Morgan McSweeney's evidence? Did we learn very much from this? It seems a lot of the time there wasn't a written record. It seems he can't remember certain things. I just wonder what you made of this.
So there wasn't a key bombshell revelation from the several hours that Morgan McSweeney was facing that committee. What it did do was confirm some things that we already know. We know that the advice to appoint Peter Mandelson was driven by Morgan McSweeney. He admitted it there, but he also later kind of backtracked a little bit and did stress that it was ultimately the Prime Minister's decision. So this does come down to a matter of the Prime Minister's judgment. The government has been quite successful over the last couple of weeks as making the conversation regarding the Mandelson scandal one about process. Was due process followed? Who saw the vetting when? Who's responsible for that vetting not being on the desk of the person that it should have been on, etc., etc. And those are all key questions, and hopefully we will get to the bottom of it. But the fact remains, risks about Peter Mandelson were raised before he was even in the conversation and in the discussion about becoming UK ambassador to Washington. We've known about those risks for a decade and a half. The Prime Minister still chose to appoint them. It doesn't matter how many select committee hearings we have from Prime Ministerial aides and the like. That question of the Prime Minister's judgment is going to remain.
Yes, and certainly you're absolutely right. We've known there are questions of judgment from Mandelson for a decade and a half, as you correctly say. Very interesting. You and I both know, covering Westminster for, well, perhaps longer than I care to remember, but certainly we know a soundbite when we hear one, and this is the one that Morgan McSweeney, as soon as I heard it, I actually messaged one of the contributors to this programme and said, that's the soundbite he wants us to play, and I'll fall into his trap right now and hear what he had to say about a knife through his soul.
The nature of the relationship that I understood he had with Epstein was not a close friendship. How I understood it at the time was a passing acquaintance that he regretted having, and that he apologised for. What has emerged since then was way, way, way worse than I had expected at the time. And it was when I saw the pictures, when I saw the Bloomberg questions in September 2025, I have to say it was like a knife through my soul, I did not expect that level of connection that he was talking about there.
Did you find this evidence credible, Rachel?
Well, it's a good line, isn't it? But the fact remains that newspaper outlets, the FT in particular, had published the revelation that Peter Mandelson had stayed in Jeffrey Epstein's flat after Epstein's first conviction for child sex trafficking, and that was in the public domain, I think, before Labour even won the election. And Morgan McSweeney was asked about that, and he sort of hedged a little bit. We know that there are some questions that he put to Mandelson in writing. Mandelson replied. We don't have those documents yet because the Metropolitan Police asked that they not be released until they continue with their investigations. But the question of whether it was a passing acquaintance or something more, that information was in the public domain. And later on in the session, Morgan McSweeney did acknowledge that, and he sort of suggested that he had thought that perhaps the vetting would provide a bit more clarity on that relationship post-conviction and perhaps on staying in Jeffrey Epstein's property. But once you know that those facts were widely available, it does make the knife through the heart line a bit, has that been focus grouped? Has that been designed so that we play it on the news?
Well, if there's anything Morgan McSweeney understands, it's the message. He is a very, very good political operator, and he will have known exactly what he was doing with that. You mentioned the Financial Times there. They have a very interesting report this evening, I'm sure you've seen it, about the current ambassador, talking about Mandelson, the current ambassador to the United States. He's made some remarks, apparently, about 10 weeks ago to school children about the special relationship. He says there isn't really one, and actually it's about Israel and the United States having a special relationship rather than the UK and America having that relationship. Within the last hour, the King has been speaking in Congress. Let's just hear a little bit about what he's been saying, then I'll get Rachel's reaction. This is King Charles III speaking in the last hour to a joint session of the US Congress.
Standing here today, it is hard not to feel the weight of history on my shoulder, because the modern relationship between our two nations and our own peoples spans not merely 250 years, but over 4 centuries. It is extraordinary to think that I am the 19th in our line of sovereigns to study with daily attention the affairs of America. So I come here today with the highest respect for the United States Congress.
What we've seen right there, I would suggest, Rachel, is the longer term stuff, the big stuff, the monarchy, which is an institution which far outlasts any other politician. But what do you make of the fact that we have the state visit right now? We have a monarch who Trump clearly has a lot of respect for and a lot of love for, and indeed kept in touch with in between his 2 terms as president. Yet his relationship with Starmer is dreadful.
It's interesting, isn't it? And I think we all know that had the situation between the UK and the US been slightly different, then this visit probably would have been postponed, given what we know about the King's health and also, of course, the assassination attempt over the weekend. You can imagine the palace wanting to delay and postpone were it not for the fact that this is a really, really key state visit, and there's a lot riding on it in terms of repairing the so-called special relationship beyond simply the relationship between the inhabitants of number 10 Downing Street and the White House. You do get a sense there from the King, who is in many ways the UK's most experienced diplomat, possibly one of the most experienced diplomats in the world.
Very good point. Very good point.
That he understands the gravity of the situation, and I think the message there is that it's not about what's been going on in recent weeks or recent months, that the UK and the US do have a long-standing partnership based on mutual interests. The question is, are those interests now diverging?
Rachel, thank you. I'm not sure the King quite sees himself as an employee of the Foreign Office, but very, very good point there about him being a very experienced diplomat. Always worth listening to Rachel Cunliffe from the New Statesman there, particularly on the travails of the Prime Minister and the Labour Party, but everything else as well. So thank you to her, Rachel Cunliffe, Associate Political Editor of the New Statesman. So much to discuss. Let's discuss it with you next. 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss. Stay with us here on Talk.
I hope I wouldn't have used that. Well, certainly I don't remember trying to get any job for my mates.
Can you get a job? Can you help get a job for ex's mates? But don't tell the Foreign Secretary.
I don't think it's completely surprising that the Prime Minister would be so sensitive about the way in which he was dealing with a member of his senior team, and particularly a Director of Communications who's in minute-by-minute contact with the media, that he would want that kept to a very, very tight group of people at the time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's speak to Mandy in Felixstowe, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Mandy, you're very welcome to the programme this evening. What do you make of Starmer today?
My God, I honestly cannot believe this, Peter. We're going to hell in a handcart, we really are.
What can't you believe, Mandy?
Oh, he's got away with it again.
Do you think this Privileges Committee hearing should have happened, but the MP said no, Mandy?
I know they did, but it's only because he's talked to them all not to vote.
And what do you make of
He shouldn't take us as stupid, and as you're about to say about Morgan McSweeney, I watched that this morning, and from the first time he opened his mouth, I did not believe him. How dare he say what he said? We're not stupid, the public. We vote them in, but we can't get them out when they let us all down that easily.
So what should happen now, do you think, Mandy? What can happen now?
Oh, Christ. I don't know. He still says it sounds like, I suppose, is a better option than Angela Rayner, who even refuses to have elocution lessons. And the thought of Miliband as a Chancellor is horrifying. But where are we going now? I honestly don't know.
Mandy,
but they're not going to put a dampener on this for me today, Peter.
You've got some good news, haven't you?
Yes, I had my last round of radiotherapy today.
That's great. Congratulations. That's marvellous. How are you feeling?
Exhausted.
I'm sure you are. But optimistic?
Oh, my God. I couldn't be happier. Although there's this government thing going on, I don't agree with it. They can't take this away from me. And I'm having a sneaky drink.
Well, I think that's all right at 5 to 9 on the evening. Mandy, great to hear your news about your health. I'm delighted things are moving in the right direction, and wish you all the very, very best for the future with that. Mandy's not happy with Starmer, though. I wonder what John in Newcastle thinks. 0344 499 1000. John, what's your view on what's happened today? What do you think?
Well, in relation to Mendelssohn, I'm amazed because this man's Labour and two Labour Prime Ministers, he's been a minister in for both of them, and he was put out, his connections with China and Russia. And, I can't understand Mr. Starmer saying that, this fella, he's not to be trusted. So why did he take him on? He didn't need anybody else's information about Mendelssohn. He knew, if I knew it, and I know nothing about politics, then he must have known what has happened in the past, that two prime ministers had this man as a minister, Mendelssohn, and he was booted out as such. And so I've got no time for this situation.
So you think just Starmer should have known? He just shouldn't have appointed him in the first place. So it's interesting, John, because Rachel Cunliffe, who from the New Statesman, who we heard about a little bit earlier on, she's mentioned how it's all about process, who knew what when, developed, vetting, red, amber, green warnings and all the rest of it. I just wonder if a lot of that doesn't actually matter that much, John, because fundamentally he shouldn't have appointed him in the first place, should he?
Well, that should never have been the case. After knowing the last two prime ministers, the minister that he was in both governments, and he failed, it was a failure. So how on earth could you ever want to put a man like that back in? No, it's just pathetic. And this government is pathetic. It reminds me of the last government. The last Tory government was really pathetic too. We've got to have a change in this country. And look what's just happened recently. Yes, these immigration people coming across. Is it I forgot the massive
It's about
figure.
6,000 have arrived on small boats this year so far, I think.
Yes. Oh, well, it's unbelievable, this. You see, we're in an island, and now we have about 80 million people on this island. When I was a young man, and that was a few years ago, of course, we had... I think around about 30 million, and now we've got 80 million over them decades.
It's certainly. I don't know about about history of your lifetime, John, but certainly in the last number of years, it's definitely gone up, and we're not entirely sure what the issue is. Is that the number one issue for you? Is that what Keir Starmer needs to get down and sort out, rather than dealing with who appointed who when, someone who's no longer in that job?
Well, I come back from France 2 weeks ago, and I was amazed when I saw in the last 2 years we go every year more or less, and Calais, and how Calais, the port, has changed. Massive, beautiful, and there's been a massive amount of money spent on port in Calais. I was told, and now we are going to have ours done in 2050.
Well, it's going to take a very, very long time. Listen, John, thank you for your thoughts, and thanks to David in the Cotswolds as well. He says, what future for Starmer is it that you speak of? There really isn't one. Interestingly, the 15 Labour rebels are pretty much all from the northern Red Wall heartlands. I can only suggest they're thinking long term and want to be the few who have a good chance of winning their seats. Well, some of them are serial rebels, David, but I do think you have a point there. We're going to talk about the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill, veterans. I promise you we'd talk about that. Also more about Morgan McSweeney and Keir Starmer with the Shadow Defence Minister. Stay
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Have our veterans been betrayed? That's what we're going to talk about with Mark Francois, the Shadow Defence Minister, in just a second. Big vote in Parliament last night. You might have missed it. You might not have heard too much about it in the media today, but there are so many stories that we tell you that other stations don't. That's part of the reason you must stay with Talk, because we're going to tell you about veterans of Northern Ireland, of Afghanistan, of Iraq, who are all affected by this. I know there are loads of military families, there are loads of ex-servicemen and women, loads of people who served in uniform of all kinds who listen and watch this programme. And this is one of the stories that I want to talk about properly with the Shadow Defence Minister, Mark Francois, in just a second, to see where we are and what's going to happen next. The King has been talking to Congress. We'll reflect on that with Mark as well in a second. We'll also talk about the dramatic events in Parliament today, Morgan McSweeney's evidence, and Keir Starmer winning that vote that means he will not face a Privileges Committee investigation. We'll also talk about how to tell if your partner is cheating and whether chips pinched from a friend's plate really do taste better. We cover everything on this show and we want to hear your views on it all too. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note. We've played out some of those this evening. We'll play more before 10. Less than a minute, please. Send them right through WhatsApp to 0344 499 1000. You can send me a text message via WhatsApp on that number too, or give me a ring. That number one more time, 0344 499 1000. We have Snap polling from YouGov as well, saying 3 in 5 British people say there should be an inquiry into whether the Prime Minister misled Parliament over Mandelson. Are you one of them? Let me know your thoughts. Loads to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Right then, Mark Francois is the Shadow Defence Minister and is with me now. Mark, good evening.
Good evening.
Mark, I definitely want to talk about the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill, but let me just get a quick reaction from you on what the King has been saying. You're as big a patriot as any MP I've met, and we'll just play a little tiny bit about what the King's been saying to Congress this evening within the last hour.
Standing here today, it is hard not to feel the weight of history on my shoulder, because the modern relationship between our two nations and our own peoples spans not merely 250 years, but over 4 centuries. It is extraordinary to think that I am the 19th in our line of sovereigns to study with daily attention the affairs of America. So I come here today with the highest respect for the United States Congress.
The King speaking to Congress within the last hour. Mark Francois, what do you make of what the King said on the special relationship, an incredibly special thing, an incredibly important thing? The King, as one of my commentators earlier on said, one of the most experienced diplomats of this country.
Yes, he is. And in addressing Congress, Peter, he was following in the footsteps of her late Majesty. I think from memory, she did that from that same podium in, I think it was 1991. And that went down very well. And I'm sure that what His Majesty said will go down very well as well. I think you're right. You might argue that the King is a sort of super diplomat, certainly more successful than our last ambassador to Washington. And we know that President Trump has a deep affection for the royal family. He's basically an Anglophile. His mother was Scottish. So we have a bit of a head start there, and we have had very difficult relations between the government here and the White House in the last couple of months.
And I know you're just back from Washington yourself, Mark.
Yes.
What did you find when you were there?
The context is I was at a conference to do with AUKUS, the American, Australian, UK submarine program. So in terms of potential threats from the Russians and the Chinese, we were all absolutely on the same page. But it's probably true to say that as a Brit in Washington last week, you could tell that the administration were pretty irritated with the actions of the current government, particularly the fact that they denied them the use of the runway at Diego Garcia, which is even more ironic, bearing in mind we had all this row about the bonkers idea of paying £35 billion of British taxpayers' money in order to rent back some islands that belong to us in the first place. But mercifully, myself and my Conservative colleagues managed to, with some help from President Trump, to defeat that. But yeah, there was still a certain frisson, you might say, out in Washington, and I'm sure I can think of no better person to help to repair that than His Majesty.
And speaking of the actions of the government here today, I'll maybe ask you towards the end of this interview about what you think of what's happened in Parliament today, just briefly. But I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on what the government's planned reforms on laws around immunity and prosecutions and crimes during the Troubles. They're going to be debated now at the next parliamentary session. after support from MPs. I know you opposed this. The Northern Ireland Troubles Bill backed in a carryover motion in the Commons. This was last night, and actually because the vote was going on, we've deliberately waited until today to see how it's all settled down and the rebellions and abstentions and all the rest of it. What is your analysis of what will happen now?
Well, just quickly to give the context to your viewers, Peter. So,
sure.
As we're coming to the end of a parliamentary year, it looks like tomorrow, we will have Prime Minister's questions tomorrow, and then we'll pull up. If there hadn't been what's called a carryover motion passed, the bill will automatically have fallen. That's in the end what happened to the quite controversial assisted dying. So the government put down this motion to carry the bill over into the new session. So if you were against the bill, which I and my Conservative colleagues have been from the outset, it made sense to vote against the carryover, so we did. Interestingly, about a third of Labour MPs abstained, including the Armed Forces Minister Al Carnes.
He was conveniently elsewhere, wasn't he?
Yes, rather like McCavity. He wasn't there. Neither was the Procurement Minister in the MOD, Luke Pollard. But here's a couple of real ironies. The Prime Minister abstained. So he whipped his MPs, to go over the top, as it were, to vote for this legislation, which we get into the detail, but has the practical effect of opening up our Northern Ireland veterans to renewed lawfare, often at the hands of Sinn Féin. Happy to debate that a bit more in a moment, but that's what the bill does. And he whipped his MPs to vote for that, knowing it would be unpopular in their constituencies and that we've got elections in a week's time. And yet he didn't go through the lobbies with them. So that is not leadership. And interestingly, the Foreign Secretary abstained, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, abstained. He might have been, his mind might have been elsewhere. And also, surprisingly, Nigel Farage abstained as well. So there's a saying in Parliament, the truth lies in the division lists, and we had some very interesting choices last night. In the end, it went through with a Labour bloc vote by 276 to 175. But as Disraeli once said, we may not win the vote tonight, but we can win the argument. And I believe we won the argument. And if nothing else, we made Labour own it.
Yes, it's very, very interesting, actually, Mark, because obviously some MPs can be paired and all the rest of it, and there are various aspects of that. But if you look at actually what the DUP leader, the unionist leader in Parliament said, Gavin Robinson, he urged the government to scrap the bill, reintroduce another that can command the confidence of victims and veterans. And what's been really interesting, actually, I would argue the Conservatives bill that they brought in through Parliament, a lot of victims in Northern Ireland really didn't like that bill. But we're in a position now where no one's happy with what the Parliament, with what Labour want to do, apart from Labour and the Prime Minister. Why do you think he's doing it? And what can be done to change things so that there is a wider consensus on this very, very tricky issue? And I say this every time we talk about it. The people who served in uniform in Northern Ireland allowed the peace process to happen. 300,000 of them over the course of the Troubles. The vast majority of them served with great bravery and distinction. Some of them didn't, and truth and justice for what they did, as for what the terrorists did, needs to happen, and often hasn't happened for a variety of reasons, Mark.
Well, legacy to 2023 took 18 months to get through Parliament, because, as you say, it's a complicated issue. This is not a kind of one-line, back of the fag packet solution.
If it could have been solved 28 years ago in the Belfast Agreement, it would have been. There's a reason it's taken more than a quarter of a century.
To help your viewers, the concept of the Legacy Act, which is still on the statute book, it's still there, was essentially based on the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission model. The Defence Select Committee that I served on did a very detailed report back in 2017 under Dr. Julian Lewis, a brilliant chairman, and we recommended something along the lines of the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and that in the end ended up being the Legacy Act. So the fundamental problem with what Labour are proposing is it is one-sided, it is two-tier justice, and it's made worse. And I take your point. about soldiers must obey the law. No one is arguing anything different. But what we have seen, what's come to light, partly exposed by us in Parliament, in fairness, is that a few years ago there was a lawyer called Phil Shiner who made a fortune in legal aid out of coming up with vexatious, invented claims against British veterans who served in Iraq. Unfortunately, he was assisted in some of those court cases by Keir Starmer when he was a QC before he became a Member of Parliament, and by Richard Hermer, now the Attorney General. Now, in the end, when it all came to light, Shiner was convicted of fraud and struck off as a solicitor. So Hilary Benn, the current Northern Ireland Secretary, has said a number of times in the Commons, there is no such thing as a vexatious prosecution. Well, clearly, empirically, there is, because that's why Phil Shiner was struck off for generating hundreds of them for money. And it's really sad that our Prime Minister and our Attorney General at one time helped him to do it. So why are they pushing on with it now? You asked me that question. It's because they're human rights fanatics. And they believe the European Convention on Human Rights trumps all, no pun intended, all other considerations when it should not.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens in the King's Speech and indeed in the next parliamentary session on this. No doubt we'll talk more about it. Just before you go, Mark, I wonder if I could ask your opinion on McSweeney's evidence today and the fact that the Prime Minister managed to get through a Privileges Committee vote as well. Let's just hear a quick line from Morgan McSweeney talking about his judgment and the Prime Minister's judgment over Peter Mandelson.
What I did do was make a recommendation based on my judgment that Mandelson's experience, relationships and political skills could serve the national interest in Washington at an important moment. That judgment was a mistake.
What did you make of Morgan McSweeney's evidence today, however much you managed to see of it? I know you're a busy man, Mark, but you'll have seen reaction to it as well. And the fact that that vote happened in Parliament this evening, just about 15 Labour rebels to that.
Well, again, it was the Labour bloc vote. You know, they were dragooned by the whips through the lobbies. But I think Starmer is not going to get out of this. Why do I say that? I've been an MP for 25 years. If you like, I've seen this movie before. I remember when Starmer was begging for Boris Johnson to be referred to the Privileges. And I think one of the reasons the public are so angry, and you've got that hole that you mentioned just a few moments ago, is because, let's be honest, Keir Starmer was so unbelievably sanctimonious about everyone else's behaviour. But now when he's the one, as it were, in the dock, everything is someone else's fault. And here's the problem I think Labour had. Every day there's another revelation that shows the public outside of the Westminster bubble that Keir Starmer desperately wanted Peter Mandelson to be the ambassador to Washington. Mandelson was his man. This was Mandelson that helped him become the leader of the Labour Party with McSweeney. McSweeney worked for Mandelson many years ago. He was lobbying Starmer to appoint him. Mandelson was Starmer's man, and everyone knows it. So the only way that they can atone for this scandal, and it is a scandal, is for Starmer to resign. There is no other way that Labour can clear the decks on this. Everyone knows he was Starmer's pick. Everyone knows he was a disaster. Everyone knows Starmer was warned against him. Everyone knows he went ahead anyway. The only way Labour will move on from this is when Sir Keir Starmer was resigned as Prime Minister.
Mark, thank you. As always, covered quite a lot in this interview. Mark Francois there, the Shadow Defence Minister for the Conservatives. Lots in that, and one thing I don't think, he was talking there about, the echoes of Keir Starmer, in his view, sanctimonious over Boris Johnson. I don't think it is a coincidence that we're hearing one rule for them, one rule for everybody else in the language that the Conservatives are saying. And that, of course, is something that many people worry about when it comes to the veterans. I know Debbie in Lincolnshire has some views on this. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Debbie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say this evening?
Evening, Peter. Nice to talk to you. I find this all very odd. So I'm ex-serving. I was a soldier. And we have the rules of engagement, which we have to follow. So therefore, we can't just go out gung-ho. And we also have our chain of command that we have to follow. So why are we being persecuted when we followed orders, which is what we're told to do?
It's worse than that, Debbie, because what the law will do now is say that might have been legal at the most law isn't retrospective, right? If you're travelling at 60 miles an hour down the road and we decide as a country to change the speed limit to 50 miles an hour, we're not going to go back to all the people who travelled at 60 miles an hour when it was the law and say, you broke the law, we're going to charge you for that. But what can happen with some of this legislation is that you can say what you did at the time was legal, but because of changes in the law and because of this bill, we can go back and say what you did then, which was legal and you were following orders in order to do it, is now illegal and we're going to prosecute you for it. That's mad and deeply unfair.
Well, I was going to say, do you not think that's disgusting?
Yes, completely. It's ludicrous.
Because my father-in-law, he finished off as a colonel. He did a couple of tours of Northern Ireland. I did Bosnia. My brother-in-law did Afghan and Iraq. Seriously? It's like, are they going to wait till they're... we've got a guy in our village that did Opbana, which is Northern Ireland, and he's going through dementia, and they're chasing after people like him. It's like you sort of sit down and think, why did I bother serving my country?
I think a lot of people will ask that question. First of all, thank you for doing so. And secondly, I just wonder, Debbie, what your thoughts are on the fact that, all those people you mentioned, that guy in your village, your relatives, you, did exactly the right thing, did everything you were meant to do within the law. There were some people in Northern Ireland, Bloody Sunday is a very good example, of people who did not do things within the law. What should happen to them, Debbie, in your view?
I think everybody is not above the law. So if people took the law into their own hands, that's wrong. We have that in society today. They should be brought to account, but I don't think everybody should be put into the same basket. If there are people that did tab the boards, which is a military term, and did exactly what was expected of them and what they were asked to do, but in the correct manner, because there is nothing wrong. I talk to my husband all the time, he's still serving. There is nothing wrong with questioning why do you want me to do that? We all know what's right and wrong. But yes, if people are taking the law into their own hands, deal with them. But you can't task everyone with the same brush.
Absolutely.
Was that term. But yeah, I don't think you should take everyone down. There's good and bad and everything. But for me, everyone should be abiding the rules that they know they signed up to. But if they have been naughty, just completely wrong, out of order, they should be dealt with. Completely agree with you.
Really interesting to talk to you, Debbie, and thanks for that. Very interesting to hear from someone, a recent veteran herself. Well, she is a veteran, but recently served our country herself. Lots of relatives Debbie was talking about there who are currently still serving. And of course, what do you do about the people who did fall below the very, very high standards that Debbie and all those other people she mentioned have maintained? So it's a big live issue. What do you think about it? 0344 499 1000. Lots of people want to talk about Starmer, Mandelson, McSweeney as well. We'll take more of your calls next here on Talk.
I hope I wouldn't have used that. Well, certainly I don't remember trying to get any job for my mates.
Can you get a job? Can you help get a job for ex's mates? But don't tell the Foreign Secretary.
I don't think it's completely surprising that the Prime Minister would be so sensitive about the way in which he was dealing with a member of his senior team, and particularly a Director of Communications who's in minute-by-minute contact with the media, that he would want that kept to a very, very tight group of people at the time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Alex in Cardiff, who has suggested that I go round the country with Julia Hartley-Brewer and do a podcast. That is a very interesting idea. I will talk to the Ayatollah of audio himself, Danny Morris, about that idea at some stage. That is a very good one. I would happily tour the country with Julia Hartley-Brewer. Mark in Solihull says, great show, Peter. My theory is why Starmer wants the Premiership so badly is that he needs to make the deal with Europe to bring us in again. Only then will Brussels sign up to BRICS. Once all the Western currencies collapse, then China pulls the handle and sadly the USA is full. That's the plan, says Mark in Solihull. I'm not sure it's that developed a plan, I must say. Angie says, I want to know if the King knew about Andrew and Mandelson's relationship and connection to Epstein when he approved the appointment. They said the King had a say. It's interesting with the King, he can't really go against things, but he did apparently say, is this a good idea? So he did kind of question it, certainly when it came to Mandelson. But his constitutional role is basically to do what the government tells him, I'm afraid. Thank you to the texter who also says this whole advisor role is totally overplayed. It just allows the person at the top, i.e. Starmer, to dodge the responsibility and claim it what he was advised, just a total dereliction of responsibility. Listen, it is a much misunderstood role, those advisors, people like Morgan McSweeney. I think someone needs to write a book about it, perhaps opening up the much misunderstood role, the secret life of these special advisors. Jim is in the Wirral and watched most of the Commons debate. Jim, you've been busy, you've watched a lot of it. What did you make of all of this, particularly when it comes to Starmer's position now? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
I have to say, before I start, you're my favourite presenter of Talk TV.
Oh, that's very kind, Jim. Thank you.
Yeah. I've watched it all today, and I've taken a lot of all the stuff that they've said with a pinch of salt. But my main concern is they're all saying, all the government people are saying, at the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, what's his name?
Darren Jones. Sorry. Torsten Bell is the one who's Chief Secretary of the Treasury. Chief Secretary of the Prime Minister is Darren Jones. Sorry, I got that wrong.
Darren Jones, Darren Jones. The chap that said most of the people who coming over on the boats are children.
That's Darren Jones.
Women.
That's Darren Jones. Yes.
Yeah, they're absolutely. He's got his finger on the pulse totally. And I listened to him summing up, and according to him, all due process was adhered to, which I can accept. But if all due process was adhered to, why on earth have 3 people lost their jobs over it?
Yes. Well, his point is that they didn't follow the process. And I just wonder, actually, Jim, maybe there's something in that, because are we being lost in process? This has been going on for quite a while, okay? The fundamental thing remains that he shouldn't have been appointed in the first place.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. And what I'm saying, Peter, is that is totally correct. But when they say due process has been adhered to, they don't say that due process has been adhered to, but only by such and such a person. Mm-hmm. They say all due process has been adhered to. And none of them have said that the 3 people, is it 3 or 4 people that have been thrown under the bus?
Well, it depends.
I think 3 have been thrown under the bus.
Ollie Robbins is the top diplomat, the head of the Foreign Office. He's lost his job. Morgan McSweeney resigned over it. Mandelson, of course, lost his job as well. So that's 3. I'm trying to think of any others. I'm trying to remember any others. That seems to be it.
I thought there was another big civil servant.
There may well have been. There may well have been.
Anyway, my point is that they can't. I mean, why? I've never heard anybody specifically say that any of those 3 people didn't adhere to due process.
Mm-hmm.
And if they adhered to due process, why did they get sacked? It's an absolute shambles.
Do you think they're hiding behind all that, especially when we look at what happened in the Commons today and the fact that that Privileges Committee investigation now won't happen? What did you make of what you heard in the comments?
What I heard was that if the guy has got nothing to hide, then why whip his MPs? I've always said to my girls and people that I deal with, if you go to court and you're telling the truth, you've got nothing to fear.
Yeah. Or really to remember, because it's just there. You haven't got to think too much about it because it's just there.
At all. You haven't got to start thinking, well, what did I say then? What did I say? What did I say? And that's what they're all saying. What did I say on such and such? It doesn't make any. If you're telling the truth, you've got nothing to hide. You have no fear. And that I'm afraid, Keir Starmer is exactly what it says on the tin. He's incapable. He's divisive. I don't know. I can't find words to describe him.
I can hear the frustration in your voice, Jim. And there's so many of our viewers and listeners who just do not like him, who just do not think he's a good Prime Minister, don't think he's made the right decisions. And it was interesting because, you know, a number of people say, oh, they inherited this, that and the other from the Tories. They didn't inherit this. They certainly inherited a lot of difficult things from the Tories. They didn't inherit this. This is an entirely created problem. They created themselves and they're now trying to get out of it. Jim, what should happen now?
Well, what should happen now? I think we should still. I think the politicians should continue to seek and search for the truth, and it can't lie the way it is now. We can't let it rest. Kemi Badenoch, who I thought did quite well today, can't let it rest. I thought one particular there was a member of the Conservative Party, a backbencher, a black guy. I don't know what his name was, but I've never seen him before. I don't know his name, but he sounded very eloquent and it sounded like a lawyer, and I thought he was absolutely superb. I thought that the Scottish, the SNP chat was very good.
Is that the Scottish, the SNP guy? What's his name? Stephen Flynn, is that his name?
Yeah, I think it's Stephen Flynn. Yeah, I thought he was quite good. I've got one thing for Keir Starmer, and that is contempt.
And I think a lot of people feel exactly the same way. Jim, we'll just have to end it there because I want to go to another caller in just a second. But a lot of common sense spoken by Jim there. I think you've spoken for a lot of people this evening, Jim, with your views. And please do give me another ring before too long. That's Jim in the World there. On the soldiers, Elisa in Chelmsford has been in touch.
I'm absolutely furious at the injustice of looking back at what the soldiers, the officers did back then, which was lawful, that now can be deemed unlawful. Where is the justice in this absolute lunacy? You said it was mad. I say it's mad. We all think it's mad. This government must itself then be mad.
Elisa, thank you for that. There's certainly a lot of crazy stuff going on. There's an awful lot that I think we can talk about, certainly in the next half an hour. 0344 499 1000. And just Jim there in the World talking about Kemi Badenoch, he's thought that she'd done a good job today. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Every Wednesday when Parliament's in session, I am in this studio with Julia Hartley-Brewer on the other side of the desk talking about what happens at Prime Minister's Questions. So tomorrow from 12, I will be with Julia in this studio for about 25 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is, to go through what Kemi Badenoch and Starmer are saying. It'll be very interesting as well to hear from other parties because it is the last PMQs before the local elections and indeed the Scottish and Welsh, Scottish Parliament, Welsh Assembly elections that are happening on the 7th. That is in 9 days' time. Polls absolutely fascinating on that as well in terms of how difficult it could be for Labour. The Liberal Democrats might do well. They often do reasonably well in local elections. Reform UK leading the way. Another poll today putting them at, I think, 27% was what I had. I had it in front of me. I don't at the moment, unfortunately, but certainly I'll look in the break and find it. But certainly they have done very well in a recent YouGov poll. The poll just out today, and these polls are coming thick and fast in all of this. For Starmer himself, I think he is under a lot of pressure, and I'd be very interested to hear what Mark in Lincolnshire thinks about that. He's on the phone right now. He's giving me a ring, as you can too, on 0344 499 1000. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What do you make of this?
Hi there, Peter.
Hi there.
Hi there. As I said to, I always forget his name.
Matt.
Sorry?
Matt,
oh yeah. As I was saying to him, boring. Stuff just really bores me. I just find it's just the establishment machine, just whirring itself around again. Round and round we go, like the bloody merry-go-round.
do you think they're hiding behind process in this? What do you think Keir Starmer's trying to do at the moment?
The whole system hides behind process, Peter. Starmer's... I don't know who really knows what Starmer's trying to do here. He's obviously trying to cling on to his job, I imagine. He quite likes the power trip.
Nobody leaves number 10 voluntarily, not even Harold Wilson. I mean, he left because of a health, an undisclosed health condition, but everybody else is generally dragged out kicking and screaming.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? He's definitely going to be that guy. He's not going to just walk. There's no way... Because something you always hear quite a lot of, from the reform angle, that, like Farage is saying, general election 2027, because he seems to think for some reason that there's any situation that's going to happen with this government that would trigger them to call a general election. It's just never going to happen. That will never happen, because they know.
I agree with you. I think Farage is wrong, and I agree with you. I think Farage is factually wrong in this. I think that Starmer is going to go as long as he possibly can, because look at the polls at the moment. We're in a situation where Labour would lose a general election tomorrow. That's been the situation for a very long time, and dramatically lose it. So why would turkeys vote for Christmas?
Well, exactly, because he's got hundreds of backbenchers there that know that this gravy train's going to stop in a few years. They don't want that to stop anytime soon, because most of them are never going to get a job anywhere else. So it's like, well, this fantasy land of Farage is like, what are you talking about, mate? But the way I see it anyway, loads and loads of people that certainly listen to this station at least, they're looking for a reform government. I don't really see any benefit of that, if I'm honest, because I just see it just as a continuation of the establishment.
I mean, they would say their whole shtick, Reform UK would argue their entire thing is that they're not what some people call the Unity Party. They're not the Conservatives, they're not Labour, and they would be very, very different.
But they are, though, aren't they, Peter? Because you've got,
Why? Why do you say that?
Well, for example, I mean, obviously you've got the obvious, the visible thing, which is obviously bringing in, most of their existing MPs right now are Tories, if not all of them, I think. I mean, if you want to...
But there are many who have absolutely... Farage was never a Tory MP, neither was Richard Tice, although he was a donor to the Conservative Party, and Farage was a member of the Conservative Party, but there weren't Tory MPs. That's a side point of pedantry, but I suppose my point is that a lot of those Conservatives really had fallen out of love with the Conservative project and feel that Reform UK represents their views more accurately.
But look at what Farage is doing, and he does this constantly, Peter. One of the things he did recently, didn't he? He did a press thing last week, where he's talking about, I think he was waffling on about he's up to 1 million will go. If you look at the language in there, it's very establishment language. What he's talking about is up to 1 million if it's believed that, they're bogus claims, if it's believed this, if it's believed that. And then he goes into his next diatribe, where he's essentially begging the establishment to like him and not call him a racist, where he starts, bragging about, what was it he said? I think the exact quote is, anybody thinking we're going down a nativist route? Well, look, the amount of ethnic minorities we're standing in the upcoming elections. Why are they even saying that? Why is that even a thing?
Well, it's something he wants to say.
Because he doesn't want to be called racist, Peter, because At the end of the day, he's controllable because he's scared of being.
He's not controllable. Nigel Farage is not controlled by anybody, Mark. Nigel Farage is controlled by Nigel Farage. But listen, we'll leave it there. Thanks for your thoughts. Two people who are probably never going to go on a spa weekend together, Mark in Lincolnshire and Nigel Farage. Lots more to talk about, including when relationships go wrong, the rise of digital infidelity in the smartphone era, how to tell when your partner is cheating with all the technology that is there. There's also a bit of breaking news from the United States, and that is that the former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted over a photo of seashells officials say threatened President Donald Trump, making the administration's second attempt to prosecute one of his largest political opponents. That is CNN reporting that, the BBC is reporting it as well. The indictment was brought in the Eastern District of North Carolina. An arrest warrant was issued for Comey by a court clerk. A photo of seashells. What on earth is that about? I'll see if I can do a bit of research over the break. Maybe our producers can enlighten me. We're also going to talk to Lucy Beresford, the psychotherapist and broadcaster, about not just the rise of digital infidelity, but also why it is more satisfying to nick someone's chips. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, we've looked into this over the break. The former FBI Director James Comey charged today with threatening President Donald Trump's life. He posted an image of seashells spelling out the numbers 8647 on his Instagram account last year, according to the federal indictment. I can barely believe I'm reading this. 86 is a term often used in the restaurant industry when a menu item is discontinued. The Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary says it can broadly mean to eject, dismiss, or remove someone. So you say, that we no longer serve the pesto, pasta, chicken, whatever it is, we're 86ing that. And then it was 8647. Trump is the 47th US president. So Comey, who is the sort of hated former FBI director who Trump doesn't like for a variety of reasons, is facing charges of making a threat against the president and transmitting a threat in interstate commerce, according to court documents. I'm looking at this picture right now, and it's literally seashells, and he's put 8647, he spelled it out in seashells, on a sandy beach. And that's why he's been indicted. What a crazy day. I mean, it's just been a crazy day for lots and lots and lots of reasons. Let's get someone who can cut through the noise, certainly on the issue of the rise of digital infidelity in the smartphone era. That is Lucy Beresford, the psychotherapist and broadcaster. Lucy, great to have you on the programme to speak some sense.
Well, I'm glad you recognise that as my role in life, yeah.
Before we get into the very, very important issue of the rise in digital infidelity in the smartphone era, perhaps you could tell me your thoughts on why it is more satisfying to nick someone's chips, to nick and indeed consume chips that were not yours in the first place.
With mayonnaise, can I just add that?
You can. I've been a victim of this. I am, you know, je suis chip victim, because I've had chips and then Lucy,
with me,
with Lucy, and Lucy has nicked my chips, or maybe I nicked your chips. I don't know. I mean, let the historians decide. You know, these things get lost in the sands of time.
They do, and they're not euphemistic either. So I think we should just clarify that as well. There's something about the forbidden fruit dimension of having someone else's food. There was a very famous cartoon, strip cartoon in a magazine many years ago, which basically highlighted the fact that women feel that food that is taken from other people's plates, usually their partner or someone they're dating, is free of calories as well. So you can have no guilt in having a spoonful of someone else's ice cream, but the same applies to chips. If you have a sort of surreptitious stealing of the chips, there's something that happens in the brain, the thrill, the excitement, the buzz that you're doing something slightly untoward that actively makes the chips taste better. There's been research on it that actually suggests that people feel way more tempted to have food that they have perhaps had and they haven't paid for it, or they haven't actually ordered it. There's something in the brain that suggests I'm having something naughty, and that's what makes it taste so much better.
Nicking chips is perhaps not the crime of the century, but isn't it the case that people who do carry out, you know, proper theft, really, I mean, people who shoplift, for example, people who steal money or whatever, there are signals to the brain that find that a kind of risky, thrilling activity, in the way that, you know, if we go on a roller coaster, at least the thought of danger or the worry of danger does release chemicals to the brain, doesn't it?
It does, and we learn that as children very early on with games like hide and seek, or being kind of chased in games of tag, or being discovered in secret hiding places. There is a danger there, but it's not a real danger. The brain is processing it as if it were a real threat. But there's also the relief in knowing that this isn't a real threat. It's just my dad chasing me around the garden. It's just a roller coaster ride. I'm not in imminent danger. So that juxtaposition emotionally of thinking I've got a real adrenaline rush of something dangerous, but actually my brain says, but this isn't real. This isn't a saber-toothed tiger that I have to run away from. That's a very important actual life skill to develop, to process when is something a real threat and when is something just make-believe. And to be able to discern those two things is a really important life skill which we learn in childhood.
Speaking of doing things that may be thrilling but also less perhaps moral than people might want them to be, there's a very, very interesting article today about how to tell your partner is cheating, especially when it comes to phone settings. And there are all sorts of things that you can do on your smartphone. There's not just, of course, the password and so on, but there are apps that don't leave evidence. There are all sorts of secret profiles, vanish mode on WhatsApp and different things like that, auto-deleting chat settings, hidden folders, encrypted messagings and things like that. There are lots of ways that your phone can actually help you cheat, if that is something that you want to do. It's not something I would recommend, but it is certainly something that is continuing. But a phone, as well, as I know you've been looking into, Lucy, can actually help you find out whether your partner has been cheating too. It can go in both directions, can't it?
That's right. And I think we have to be clear, if you do have some of these settings, or you have some of these I suppose, functions enabled on your phone, that doesn't automatically mean that you are betraying your partner. It could be because you've got financial records or medical records that you don't want someone to find out about, not necessarily your partner, but just in case your phone got stolen miraculously and other people really needed to get hold of information on that phone. You might want to keep it away from prying eyes. But for sure, the tech has advanced so much that a lot of people are able to conduct relationships covertly without necessarily anybody finding out about it, even if you've got quite healthy protocols with your partner around sharing each other's phones. So what this tech is highlighting is that you might think that your partner is saying, I've got nothing to hide, you can look at my phone, but they might have certain things enabled that then makes it hard for you to find that information. And there was some interesting research from Ashley Madison, the discretion-led dating site, they found that people don't necessarily want, if they're having an affair, they don't necessarily want to blow up their primary relationship. So it could be that your partner is having an extra relationship. They don't necessarily want to leave you. They haven't necessarily fallen out of love with you, but they are conducting behavior which is enabling them to survive in a particular sort of environment. It's making them feel emotionally different.
There is that emotional cheating, of course, and phones can absolutely facilitate that, where many people feel that can be as much of a betrayal as physically cheating on someone.
Yes, the key thing is that each couple has to navigate what constitutes cheating for that couple. So very early on, probably not on a first date, but certainly by date 3 or 4, I would want to know what somebody's views on, for example, micro-cheating might be. And this is the term that we've begun to use for things like maybe liking an ex's social media post or chatting to somebody online, even though you're in a committed relationship. If you talk to your partner about what constitutes cheating, you might discover that they have a very different value system to you, and that they do regard this as some form of infidelity, some form of betrayal, whereas a different partner might say, no, actually, I know what that's about. That's very low key. It doesn't really bother me. But you can only know if your relationship is protected from that by having a conversation. You and I have talked in the past about couples contracts, where you really thrash this kind of thing out up front to be able to say, okay, this is what I class as cheating. Are you and I on the same page in this one?
What happens if you're not? I mean, you might be head over heels with someone. You might think this is going to be a wonderful relationship. You might even think you want to marry someone. But then you have that kind of conversation and you think, actually, we're on totally different pages here. It could be heartbreaking in itself.
Well, it's going to be heartbreaking if you discover at any point that you're not aligned, but far better perhaps that you find out on date 3, 4, 5, or maybe even after only 4 or 5 months, as opposed to getting yourself emotionally attached to someone for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then you discover that you're not aligned. Heartbreak is a really difficult and an extremely painful and, one might say, debilitating condition to go through whenever it happens, but probably far better that you get that information early and you can make a choice around that. Is this a deal breaker for me or not? And then you know that going forward with your eyes open, rather than suddenly being blindsided by something 3 years down the line.
Just before you go, Lucy, Gary in Glasgow says, I agree with Lucy Beresford about food tasting better if you haven't ordered or paid for it. I find that especially true when it's food cooked for me. And Joanna in Salisbury wants me to ask you a question. Hi, Cardi P, says Joanna. Hi, Joanna. Please ask Lucy about the body language of Morgan McSweeney today. Certain questions he went into what I thought was a defensive position. Lucy, I know you're a big fan of politics. You're a political animal. Tell me about your thoughts on McSweeney.
There's a great book, by the way, called Political Animals.
Is there?
Just for your viewers to know.
Right.
To know.
It's really interesting you mentioned that, actually, because Becky's been in touch and she says, great show as always, thank you. Regarding, I'm currently reading a book about the history of special advisors written by someone who was one. I wonder who that might be. I'm halfway through it. That's absolutely fascinating and an excellent read. Next on my list is the book you recommended about why we get the wrong politicians. I'm sure that will be the same. So clearly, the people who watch and listen to this station are people of great taste, as are you, Lucy.
Great reading list, exactly. I think that Morgan McSweeney was very still, and I think that sense of defensiveness, there was no sort of hand gestures, there's very little body movement at all, and I got this sense of a real coiled spring, someone who was obviously, this being in front of a select committee is not something that happens to most of us very often, and it certainly hadn't happened to Morgan McSweeney. And he seemed incredibly tight, incredibly wound up, in the sense that he didn't want to make any gesture in case the whole argument unraveled. That was what I noticed the most, was the tightness of his body and his frame.
Very interesting. Lucy, thank you. That's Lucy Beresford there, psychotherapist and broadcaster. I appreciate you joining us on a smorgasbord of stories there. Just on James Comey, apparently this is the former FBI director who's been indicted for taking a photo of seashells reading 8647, 86 being a discontinued item, 47 being the 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump. I mean, this is crazy. Comey claims he didn't create the art, he just stumbled across it on the beach and took a photo. It was on his Instagram account. account. Now he's facing potential federal charges. We'll talk about this. Stephen Swansea wants to get in on this. We'll get him on the phone in a second, and we'll also talk to Petri Hoskin about what's coming up in her programme too. Mary, just before we go to the break, says Madison was rubber stamped into his position just like the invaders gone into Britain. That's why these similarities are soft spots. Stay with us.
I hope I wouldn't have used that. Well, certainly I don't remember trying to get any job for my mates.
Can you get a job? Can you help get a job for ex's mates? But don't tell the Foreign Secretary.
I don't think it's completely surprising that the Prime Minister would be so sensitive about the way in which he was dealing with a member of his senior team, and particularly a Director of Communications who's in minute-by-minute contact with the media, that he would want that kept to a very, very tight group of people at the time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks, everybody's been in touch, including Jeffrey. He says, you say Harold Wilson resigned due to ill health. Was that because he was allergic to the Vietnam War? No, he had dementia, I'm afraid, and that's why he left. Lots of people getting in touch, and one of them is MG from Staffordshire. MG, I have a slight bone to pick with you just before we get into cheaters. I know your first name. I'm not going to say it on air if you don't want me to. Is it all right to call you your first name?
Okay.
All right, Melanie. Great stuff. We're going to change that in there. We know I've revealed to the world that your name is Melanie. We're not going to give out your surname. Don't worry about that. Tell us your thoughts on cheaters.
I just think it's quite interesting, actually, how things have changed, because this was something when we were young we never had to really think about so much, because, you know, if somebody wanted to secretly meet somebody, they'd do it via telephone, they'd probably meet up somewhere, I don't know where, and they had to risk not being seen by people. Nowadays, it's so much easier because people can just do it online. And what I don't understand is why people would go to all this trouble to have all these apps and so on, when, you know, you just make your life more difficult for yourself. If there's a problem in your relationship, why not go for counselling?
Are you in a relationship, Melanie?
You have to go to the. I don't wish to comment on that. Thank you.
Okay, but what would you suggest is cheating? I mean, if someone likes a picture of an ex's Instagram post, or says well done on the job promotion to their ex-wife or their ex partner or whatever, is that cheating?
I think just to say well done to somebody, no. I don't, for somebody years ago or something, no, I don't think that's really a problem. If you start sort of wanting to meet up with them or showing romantic intentions or something, that's a completely different ballgame. You've gone over that line. But I think sometimes, part of maturity is growing up. I think sometimes, years down the line, you can get on with somebody better as a friend than you ever could as a partner, and so on. And I think that's the difference about being young and getting older, is that your perspective changes because you just haven't got as many years ahead.
Do you know what, Melanie? Two of my exes are two of my very best friends. They're two of my very best friends are both exes of mine. There's not a scintilla romantically between us. And if I had a new partner who said, that was, if I was in a long-term committed relationship with someone, for example, and they said, I'm not happy with you, you know, even being in the company or whatever of your former partners, I wouldn't be happy with that. I wouldn't. That would be a deal breaker for me.
Yeah, I mean, what we also had in our day as well, when I was young, was that we used to read magazines and things like that a bit more often, and now everything's more digital and online. Yeah. And Lucy Beresford, I believe, who was one of your guests today,
yes.
She wrote for a brilliant magazine called Psychology, and when that first came out, it was so different because it wasn't like the usual sorts of textbooks of giving advice.
Yes.
It was this a real life situation.
Okay.
How could you deal with it? What does this mean?
Okay.
And those things like that help people.
Very interesting. We just got to leave it there, Melanie, because we're slightly running out of time. But listen, thanks very much, and really interesting thoughts as well. Howard says you should have asked Lucy about the psychology of a TV presenter saying stay with us and then going away. Well, I am going away in a couple of minutes, but for the next 3 hours, you're very lucky to be in the company and be faithful to Petri Hoskin.
Yes, I demand faithfulness.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, coming up, we're going to be heading to Washington to speak to our reporter there who's covering for us in the US to find out about the speech and how it went and what people think about it. So we're going to be doing that. We're also going to be chatting about why all of this Mandelson stuff is important, or is it just that we think it's important? Sometimes it's difficult to tell, isn't it, when you're a journalist and you get excited about a story, whether it really matters. So we're going to be talking about that with the Deputy Political Editor at The Sun, and we're going to be chatting as well to Simon Calder about